Okay, so Gordon chapter 2, talking about music learning theory and some of the ideas of audiation and the implications of music learning theory. First of all, were there any things that just kind of stuck out to you that were either surprising or just interesting, or maybe that you had questions about before I bring some particular things to our attention this morning? Give you just a second to glance through your notes here. Yes?
I think I understood kind of the concept of artisans versus artists.
We will talk about that. Yeah, artisans versus artists, and I will repeat some of what you guys are saying, so it's everybody can make sure to hear what we're talking about. So we'll get to that in a second. That is an interesting idea, and that's one that I first thought of as I was taking some of the classes with Dr. Gordon that he brought up there too. It's a good one for us to have in our minds as we think of designing, especially our own curriculum and what our objectives are for our students. So we'll get to that in just a second. Was there anything else that kind of popped out, or that any of you had questions about? Just you thought it was kind of interesting. Maybe you never thought about something that way before.
I like the part about sequential music learning doesn't occur naturally in music as it does in language. I thought that was really interesting because, like, sometimes we think like, oh, you know, it's music, everyone understands it.
Right.
But like, he was saying like what they're relating to is actually the text in the music and not necessarily the music itself.
And I'm sure Dr. Casero covers this in the elementary general too. That's why we want a mixture of songs with words and songs without words. There is obviously value to combining the two, but we also need to let our students just hear the music and just interact with and respond to the music for them to get that kind of attention, I guess, that allows them to pick up the context and be acculturated in those sounds too. So yeah, that's something that a lot of us don't think of, because especially if we're born either with fairly high music aptitude, so our brain's kind of pre-wired to make sense of all those things naturally, or a lot of times the two go together. We are growing up in a musical family, and so we just have a lot of that going on. Our parents are singing to and with us and kind of rocking us around and playing games with us and even interacting with us one-on-one musically instead of just verbally. But a lot of people don't have that, especially in modern society. It used to be everybody made music by making music. Now they put on a recording and listen to music, or they go to a concert. It's a lot more available without you personally making music. So that means that in the home there's a lot less of that going on as well. For those that grow up in church, we tend to get a lot more of it than the rest of society too. Whether it be Sunday school songs growing up, or obviously during our worship time in the service, at least once a week we're getting something in that way. And a lot of people just don't have that. Maybe your parents sing songs in family devotions, or just, you know, they're used to singing a lot more because they've grown up in church, or if they were recently saved, at least maybe it's becoming part of their experience. And a lot of people in our culture just don't do that anymore. So that's one of the things, as you not only head out as teachers, but possibly parents someday, you want to think about with your own little kids, you know, just singing directly to them while you're kind of rocking them with the rhythm of the piece, the meter, and even little patterns, pitch patterns, take little phrases from the song and just kind of singing them to them and letting them sit there and listen, maybe just doing rhythm patterns with them, and eventually they start to try and respond, and you have people try to teach their kids to talk. They have this music babble that starts going on. Eventually they can kind of imitate what you're doing, and then by the time they're 2 or 3, they're singing and away they go, you know. And so it's pretty cool. I have a video, I may have mentioned to some of you of my oldest daughter that she was about 1.5, not 2 yet, I don't think. My son was recently born, and she was sitting there doing what I had done with her, with him, trying to teach him rhythm patterns. She called it saying the bars. Say the bars, Eric. Ba, 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 ba. You know, and he just sing there. But you know, before long, he's right in it too, and that's kind of how they grew up. So that is one of the things that's, I think, really valuable from some of these readings. Is just getting a picture and starting to think about those things as parents and not just as teachers. Anything else? Yes.
Okay, just a question about that. If you spend like, I don't know, 3 weeks with a child that's not yours,
Mm-hmm.
is it possible to instill in them something?
Oh yeah, of course.
Musically?
I mean, spend 1 minute with them and you can instill something, you know,
Yeah.
the more the better, obviously, but yeah, I would typically do that with little nieces or nephews or
Yeah.
whatever, you know, when I'm with them, instead of just playing some silly game, I'd rock them and sing to them and do something musical with them and babies in our church and things like that. And, Lizzie has had the opportunity to see some of that firsthand, where it's sequential and it's planned at the Kitty campus across from Maranatha, and a lot of other organizations, Kindred Music, I think they have in town here, and some are designed around providing sequential opportunities just like that for kids from the time they're born up until school, not only when they get to school. One of the things that we find out is when we're looking into the research is by the time kids are 5, a lot of the window for helping their developmental music aptitude is closing already. A lot of it happens between birth and 1, a little less till 3, a little less till 5, and then kind of tapers off till around age 9. And I'm not talking about learning music skills, I'm talking about wiring their brain so that they can actually learn music better the rest of their life, the music aptitude, the potential side of it. Because what your brain is acculturated with at those ages, it naturally forms connections and helps you think in those ways the rest of your life. And with different kinds of thinking, that kind of tapers off at different ages. Around age 9 or 10 with music is what they found. After that point, it's not like you can't learn music, everybody can still learn it, but how fast and how easily you can learn some of those things and how naturally you seem at music will be kind of set by that point. So we do have a few years once we get them in kindergarten, but if you look at kind of the curve from birth, you know, it's way at the tapering end as far as how fast and how far we can take them at that point. And actually, they think it might be more keeping their original level more than adding anything to their original level. So we're all kind of born with a pre-wired state to learn music, and then if it's not part of our environment, it's used for other things and kind of tapers off. And so if you're in a rich musical environment, you help to keep more of their birth level, which compared to everybody else who isn't getting anything, even if you're getting something, it's going to seem like it's a lot higher, because when we talk about music aptitude, it's kind of a comparison thing among the population. It's not an all or nothing type of thing. It's a more or less. So, yeah. Anything else that you wanted to bring up here? Yes.
I like his quote says, "Music presents; it does not represent. It was not meant to mean; it was meant to be."
Yeah, I just threw that one little philosophy for you there. I threw that one in there. See what you guys would do with it. What she's talking about the. Let's see. Yeah. I'm sorry, which question was it?
Number 10.
Okay. And it's interesting because if you just say that one more time, I actually replaced that in my version of the notes, but accidentally left it in yours, and now I'm kind of glad I did, because another class I teach too, and you guys had both brought that up as kind of a cool idea, so maybe I'll switch out the idea I replaced it with and leave that one in there, but it's the, what was the wording again?
Music presents, it does not represent. It is not meant to mean, it is meant to be.
It's not meant to mean, it's meant to be. And I will tell you that a lot of people would disagree with that statement. And I put it in there just to see what you guys thought about that. That totally reflects his view, his personal viewpoint of how music has meaning and what it is and what we take from it. So, any thoughts about that? Did that catch any of the rest of you? Music's not meant to mean, it's meant to be. You have any idea what he's talking about there?
I took it to mean that some people say music and they mean like the written notation, but he's saying music is not just what's written, it's what is heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, music is sound. We can make symbols to represent it, but it's an auditory art, right? So what he's talking about is the idea of music is not a language per se, the same way that spoken word is a language. It doesn't, there's no music dictionary that says bum 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 means tree, whereas ba 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 means grass. You know, we don't do that with music. Now, sometimes music's used in that way. Think about military bugle calls or drum signals throughout the ages. There, the soldiers are taught this sound means this sound means this, and then it's not music as much as it is what we call a signal. But music, the way that we typically use music, has a whole different way of interacting with us, and it's more at a sensations level. It kind of represents the sensations that we can feel, and we'll use words that are sensation words like dark and light and high and low and fast and slow, and things that we can approximate with our other senses. Musical sound can kind of represent those things and give us some of those internal sensations as if we were experiencing those things. But Dr. Gordon he wouldn't disagree with that. He would say it's not the point. That's more of an aesthetic understanding of music. And that's what, frankly, almost all of your students will grow up that way. We've been trained to think that way about music because almost all the music our culture has is either with lyrics or as part of a film score. And that's the music they'll have heard their whole life. Almost nobody listens to instrumental music or vocal music that they don't already know what the words mean, such as in a foreign language. So they don't interact with music in that way before they get to you. We have to help them experience that other way of knowing and understanding music as music teachers. They won't come in with that almost all. So when they hear music, they're used to picturing something or having it with some words. And we tend to use music in consistent ways in our culture enough that a lot of them will think of the same thoughts or the same words or the same pictures when they think about it, or at least ones that are pretty close to each other. That's not universal. Now, there are universal aspects to musical meaning, but it's more that initial sensation. People would tend to hear music and think that, well, that's pretty fast, or that's higher energy versus lower energy. Those basic sensations are kind of the universals across time and culture. But those specifics, you hear a theme and, oh man, that really reminds me of the ocean because blah, blah, blah. Well, probably there's some famous movie that was used with the ocean scene. That's how more than one person can get that specific about things. But your kids will grow up with that associative meaning of music being kind of the main way that they interact with music. Your students, I should say. Because that's how it always is. Music's always connected with something in their world. But now Dr. Gordon is what's called a formalist. To him, the point of music is the musical sounds, how they work in their context, how they interact with each other, the tone qualities, the harmonies. It's called a formalist way of understanding music, and that's one reason that in teaching that comes out of music learning theory, there is a lot of emphasis on helping students hear the deeper structure in music, meter and tonality, labeling things, having them improvise in meter and tonality instead of just create random stuff that maybe it'll sound good, maybe it won't. So because his idea is, and I'll read you the quote that I put in there that was kind of the sentence after that. What does Gordon mean by music appreciation and enjoyment based solely on emotion is a matter of sheer prejudice, whereas valuation based on understanding is profound. Let me read that one more time. So music appreciation, and he's purposefully zinging this at a certain group of music educators and a certain philosophy of music education that he thinks is ridiculous, but we won't get into all that today. But music appreciation and enjoyment based solely on emotion is a matter of sheer prejudice, whereas valuation based on understanding is profound. So what he's saying there is, if you make your musical choices, oh I like that, oh I don't like that, just based on an initial emotional reaction to hearing it, that's just your personal prejudice. You like it because of something about the way you are. He's not saying prejudice isn't a bad word. He's just saying you're predisposed to liking it because of something in your experience or something in your personality, and that's a very shallow way of interacting with music. Whereas he says, valuation, you value music, based on understanding is profound. And to him, understanding is being able to get into the structure and take that journey along with the music that is not just reacting to the tone quality or the energy of it, which is what a lot of people, frankly in our society, that's about as far as they can get with music. We're pretty responsive to tone quality. Our voice is very specific on tone qualities. We've learned them to read people's tone qualities. There are certain tone qualities that really resonate with us, and that's partly why people choose the instruments they do. So we have a lot of emotional connection with tone quality. And also people get just a general high or low energy, excitement, peacefulness, things like that, and from the rhythm and from the texture and all those type of things that is kind of, that's about as far as they can go unless they've been trained to kind of get into the deep structure and understand meter, tonality, understand form, understand some of those things going on. So he's saying if we just leave it at that surface level, we're doing our students a big disservice because they're missing a lot of what's going on with the music and missing a lot of the meaning that they could take from the music and what to him is the really important parts about it. Thinking in music and being able to use music as another form of thinking besides pictures and words. Have you ever self-cognated a little bit? What's going on in your mind as you think? Do you think in words? Do you think in pictures? My wife thinks in sensation. She has to translate into words, and it's really hard for her to think in pictures. I've never even knew that was a thing before, but she just kind of has these feelings, intuitions, so the way she would describe it, and she makes a lot of conclusions that she then has to translate into language based on that process inside of her. So we all think and process. A lot of times there's no verbal dialogue going on in my head, but I'm thinking. And so we all have different ways of thinking. Well, musical sound can be one of those ways. We can think in musical sound. And Dr. Gordon wants us to give our music students the ability to do that more than just this real surface kind of recognizing this piece or thinking that's cool or having that initial emotional reaction to it. He wants us to help our students understand the music because they are personally a musician to a degree that they can make a judgment based on knowledge and experience just on initial reaction. So both of those ideas, like I say, that those are little tips of the iceberg poking through of a lot bigger discussion about what he believes music education should include. Yeah.
Just one thing about what you said. You said that like the only reason we would say something sounds like the ocean, for example, is because we associate it with
Not the only reason, but the reason that a number of people would specifically immediately think of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Now,
everything's written to sound like the ocean. Then.
right. Now, what is it about the music and about the ocean that are similar? Maybe there's something that's, if it's a stormy scene, that it's powerful and it's a little chaotic. There's connections to sensation there. But that could also be a lot of other things that are powerful and chaotic, like a battle or this or that. I'm saying if a bunch of your students all have the same very specific idea when they hear music, a lot of times you'll notice it's from something in our culture that has been tied that way over and over in their minds. But somebody from the Far East that hadn't had a Western upbringing and hadn't seen those movies and heard those songs would not naturally just jump to that exact spot. They would have something else that maybe had a lot of energy and maybe some dark power, and you start using those sensation words, and that's more, they would come up with something in their world that was more like that when they heard that. But even at that, and again, it's hard for you guys because you don't hear and interact with music the same way your students will. But to get a lot of those sensation type of things going on, you have to be audiating the music. Otherwise, all you're responding to, like you said, is tone quality and basic energy level. So even at that, to get the basic sensations, maybe the composer is trying to get across, or maybe it's even. See, we kind of go back and forth in music history about whether composers are trying to get sensation across through music or whether they're just using the tools of music to have an interesting musical journey in your mind. Baroque, affections, some of those things, they are. Classical, they aren't. Romantic, they are again. Early 20th century, going back to atonal and some of those things, they aren't again. It's a very cerebral thing that they think the emotional tie-in is at best irrelevant and maybe even a little annoying. So composers even go back and forth on this one. But each individual person will have some aspect that they relate to music more in one way or the other. And there's actually more than 2 ways. There's at least 15 of them that people tend to understand and relate to music in, and maybe more than that. So that's a discussion for another day, though. So a couple things that I wanted to bring up that we hadn't necessarily talked about. One really important idea that Dr. Gordon had, and I just said it as a quote: learning is a matter of a teacher understanding needs of a student. So that's in his conversation about giving music aptitude tests so we know more what their individual needs are. We often don't have time to get to know each student deeply, especially if we're in a larger school and have a lot of students at once. But that can give us a little picture into what's going on inside their mind, and at least help group them into explaining things in a way, or having activities that will help that specific type of learning need as part of the whole class experience itself, both at the lower end and at the higher end. He mentioned that we tend to frustrate a lot of the kids who are at the lower level, and we tend to bore out of their gourd some of the kids that are at the higher level if we just teach the middle all the time. So knowing what the parameters of your class are in music aptitude, as well as skill and background and every other way you possibly can, makes you a more effective teacher. And then he also mentioned another important idea. When we're having a diverse group of people in a class, which we often do in secondary music, your high school choir will have kids who are just trying to sort of keep up and copy the kid next to them, and they'll have kids who can read well and have taken lessons for years, hopefully, and are maybe even headed into being a music ed or performance major or something like that in college, and they're all in the same group. So we tend to have these, and band the same thing, orchestra the same thing. So we tend to have these very wide, diverse levels. And he says it's not so much that we are sequencing different, we're not giving a different order or sequence of instruction. We're just giving different content to the different people in that same level. So if we're learning about this subject and we're at this step in learning it, everybody's learning it. We're not having different subjects. We're just having different difficulty levels or different stages within that subject that we're giving them. So for instance, if I'm doing rhythm patterns back and forth with the group to try and get a series of rhythms that we'll be using in their mind, I'll do some that are just really basic, I'll do some that are kind of in the middle, and I'll do some that are pretty difficult that I know some others can't get. I won't ask these kids to perform those in front of the class, but I'll at least put them out there and maybe even ask volunteers if somebody would like to try and do that. Or maybe you can take an activity to where instead of just repeating the activity, somebody's making up the next pattern for the next person. And so it's all the same activity, it's the same general idea, but you're just doing different skill levels within that idea, and instead of having everybody only do the one same thing. And what he's done in his elementary instruction, the curriculums are based on elementary, is he's actually figured out what rhythm patterns, what tonal patterns are easy, medium, and difficult to audiate. Now everybody knows which ones are already in general teaching are difficult to perform, but no one had really researched which ones are the difficult ones to audiate. So he very sequentially went through it and made a whole long list of thousands of them and put them in categories like that. And then for curriculum that are based on music learning theory, it'll have easy, medium, and difficult patterns that you can do class interaction with and even individual interaction with students once you know what their levels are. And it will challenge the kids that can do the difficult ones, but it won't frustrate and be too far ahead of the kids who are just trying to get the audiation thing still. So that's the way he went about that in part of his research. But then you can apply that principle also as a teacher to whatever you're doing. Try to, when you're doing an activity, think of something that everyone can succeed in some way at, but yet can still challenge your more advanced students. And every activity can't be that way, but at least one or two things a rehearsal, it's good to throw in that variety. Yes?
So, the question number 2, was that a yes or no answer?
According, you're talking about according to Gordon's music learning theory, is sequence of instruction or difficulty of content adapted to each student's level of music aptitude? And the answer was difficulty of content. Oh, you were thinking it's a yes or no question? Okay, Sarah. Yeah, and a lot of these I'll just type in the answer that I want there, and I don't give everyone you miss is this many points off. It's more of a general type of way I grade it. I just want you to think about them, put down what you can, and I'll type in what at least I was after. And sometimes you guys have interesting ideas that are different than that too. But and if I see a lot of people are missing that one, I think, well, I probably worded that wrongly. I'll be more specific next time. So what I was after there is an either or thing.
Okay.
And the idea is the difficulty of the content is what you adapt to their different levels of learning. And skill. Skill is definitely a thing. And knowledge. Knowledge is a thing. Some are very new to music education. Some have been in a great program since the time they're little. And so you might ask one question just for those kids who might already know it, and give them a chance to be involved in a way that kind of makes them feel special and like one of the experts in the class. And you do that on purpose, you know. And then it makes others that haven't even never thought of that think, whoa, they knew that? Interesting, you know, what am I missing? You know, it just kind of, it's like, puts a new idea that maybe you're not covering that right then for everybody, but at least puts the idea in their mind. All right, a couple other things I wanted to just point out. In most instrumental, and we could say also choral sight singing, although there are some choral methods now that have a group of pieces that the whole choir works through, and they have lesson plans made up for them, and they have activities kind of thrown in. So I have seen more choral method books coming out, but this has been in band and orchestra for a long time, so I just said instrumental here. In most instrumental music method books, objectives are sequenced according to each of the following except, and it tends to be except audiation development. That's something that the books are sequenced according to their skill, according to their music reading, according to technique. They tend not to be developed according to their audiation development. So that's something that, unless you're using a specific curriculum that's been written to do that, that's something that you add in as a teacher. And you can do it in warm-ups, and you can also do it in the way you approach learning the pieces they do have in the books, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Gordon says that without musical understanding, we did talk about this, through audiation students are left with purely emotional reactions to tone quality and dynamics, and that's that energy level and timbre thing that I was talking about before. Quickly choosing the correct buttons to push on an instrument when viewing music notation is a skill related to what, not music aptitude. Any of you guys catch that one?
Theoretical knowledge.
Okay, yeah, and that was another one I've seen people put a bunch of things in, so maybe I need to make that more clear. General intelligence is what I was going for there. And it wasn't a direct quote, it was kind of in the paragraph, but maybe that was a little too nebulous way of stating that one. So your kids who are good at symbol processing, which is a general intelligence skill, will be good at getting the right buttons or fingers pushed down when they see notes on the staff. But they may not be playing them in tune, they may not be playing them in time. They may be, hopefully they are. But that is a general intelligence skill. That's the music decoding thing he was talking about, not the music notational audiation that he's hoping that we can get our kids to. Are you guys kind of clear now between the difference with decoding and audiating notation? Does that make sense to you guys, or should we talk about that a little bit? Decoding is more of an instrumental thing. It's a pushing buttons when you see symbols. You can't decode as much in vocal music because you have to produce an actual pitch. At least you can't decode tonally as easily. But what you end up doing there is imitating instead of audiating a lot of times in choral music. You'll have 4 strong singers and everybody else in their section kind of learns by ear and copies them. And they can get really, really good sounds doing that. So unless you are spending time just doing notational audiation, sight reading, sequentially, and then having individual tests periodically on it, then a lot of times they just never move beyond that imitation stage, and they get outside of your choir, and all of a sudden they're not that good a singer. Well, you did fine, and you sang this Brahms Requiem piece and sounded beautiful. How can you not even stay on pitch barely when you're outside the choir? And that's why it is. They haven't gotten to audiation. They've been imitating really well the people sitting next to them in choir for 4 years. So that's something that can especially happen in choir, but it happens a lot with pitch and harmony in band specifically, because orchestral instruments, you have to really work on the tuning a lot. So you do get a lot. You just sound horrible if you're not constantly paying attention to intonation. Band, you can tend to push down buttons and it gets close, except on something like trombone. That one, but you can even memorize a position and just chunk it there, and it's a physical thing that you're doing with the notes more than a mental audiation thing. And even with choral music, especially rhythmically, we tie rhythms to words a lot of times that the conductor is mouthing to us. And so we just skip the audiation part, and we just go with kind of the general sense that we have, and then try to stay with the people around us and the conductor as they mouth us the words. So that's why a lot of times people will joke about choral people being bad at rhythms, and and sometimes instrumental people being bad at pitch when they try and sing, things like that. It's just kind of built into the way that unless we're working around that and building those audiation, there's an easy shortcut that people will take past those things to sound good as a group, but not as individuals. So that's something that we need to think about. So general intelligence helps with the decoding, but only developing audiation helps with real music reading, notational audiation, where we're seeing notes. We're not only imagining sound, but we're hearing it in the right key, in the right meter, in the right tonality, the way it's supposed to sound. And once your kids can do that, they can practice by themselves and get it good by themselves. They don't need you. You made them independent, and that's our goal. One clue that students are not audiating tonality is the lack of ability to tune their instrument or adjust pitches for good intonation and performance. So that is like immediate light bulb in your mind. If we're having tuning issues, there's an audiation thing that's not happening. Now we also need to have our instruments in the right general shape and length and the string to the right tension and those things. But I'm talking about once you got past the tuning note, if there's still a lot of intonation problems, it's an audiation issue, most likely. Could be an amateur thing, but a physical thing of some sort, a hand position or whatever, but most likely it's an audiation thing. A clue that students are not audiating rhythmically is when tempo is erratic. It's a lot easier to play rhythm patterns that you've done over and over than it is to not speed up or slow down, especially if the conductor stops and just lets them play or sing. Alright, so if you're noticing speeding up and slowing down tempo, that's another dead giveaway. We're not audiating this rhythmically, we're just kind of mechanically reproducing something we've done over and over and over and over. It's the memorization type of thing instead of audiation. Let's see, also students are taught to count time because they do not feel space between the beats. And we'll talk about this in a minute and let you experience things. The key to success rhythmically is imagining steady motions at different beat levels. Your macro beat, how that's divided into micro beats, and then putting your rhythms in that framework, your rhythm patterns in that framework. So if they can't imagine the motion or the space in between the beats because they've never experienced it, or because they're not really physically coordinated and they haven't developed to where they can actually move that way yet, which is a lot of times the case, then as soon as that they're left to their own devices, it's just going to implode. They're going to generally speed up. People generally speed up. Unless it's a hard thing, then they generally slow down because it's all tied to their physical motion, not to their audiation. So again, we'll talk more about that in a minute. To learn to audiate tonal patterns, students sing. To learn to audiate rhythm patterns, students move and chant. All right, so sing, focus on resting tone and singing for the rhythm, the tonal side. Focus on steady movement, putting tonal patterns on top of that for the rhythm patterns on top of the rhythm side. And why do I keep saying tonal and rhythm? One of the things that Dr. Gordon's research found is that we audiate them separately. Yes, we combine them for music, but when we're learning them and focusing on them, we have a different rhythm aptitude than we do a tonal aptitude. Those are two separate things. So you may have a higher tonal aptitude but a lower rhythm aptitude, or vice versa, or they might be in the same place. It just varies per person. It's not like if you have a high tonal aptitude, you're at least going to be medium high in rhythm. You can be low in rhythm and high in tonal. It's not as common, but you can be absolutely opposite, or the other way around. And usually you are a significant difference, that's a statistics term, enough that it's not chance is what that means. You are significantly higher in one than the other, almost universally. And then that's just two of them. There's also harmonic audiation, there's also timbre, there's also phrasing. There's all these different types of audiation, and you're naturally better or worse at all of them, and so are your students. So separating them when you're working on them is a lot quicker, more effective way to make progress than trying to do it all together. Then we put it back together and do both at once, or all three at once. But separating them into their categories will help focus on that type of audiation when we're trying to do skill development. Let's see. Now, let's get back to the question we started with. What do you think Gordon means by students being artisans rather than artists? I'm curious. What did you guys take out of that?
I feel like an artisan is someone who works with creating. I mean, they do create things, but they work with something that's already made.
Okay.
So they're basing it off already patterns that they know. But then an artist produces something completely new over and over again. And someone in my music history book said that same thing. When people started viewing musicians as artists rather than artisans. Because like they were actually producing new things every time, like something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't basing off previous patterns. They were coming up with their own, you know, kind of that audiation thing, like
Mhm.
hearing it in their head and then producing that.
Okay. What about when we, in a performance group, learn a piece that a composer wrote? Isn't that just reproducing something? 'Cause that's most of what we do, right? In performance classes.
Not quite, because the composer had one idea how it should sound. Like he might have had more like this kind of phrase, but the
Mhm.
conductor might put something more gradual. So it's different every time you produce it.
Yeah, so again, this is a spectrum. You can go from having something totally original, in that case you are improvising or composing yourself, to something that is totally just copying something else. And unfortunately, that's a lot of what happens in performance groups. We just try, we have one recording the kids are listening to, we try and copy that as much as possible. Now, is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, but it's an incomplete thing. If we only teach them to copy, that's a necessary step to becoming an artisan is a necessary step to becoming an artist. But it's not the final step that we hope for with our students. But if we're just trying to help them get the right notes, the right rhythms, in tune, do the dynamics on the page, do everything exactly like it says, and we never go beyond that, they may sound fabulous. And we may get ones at festivals, but we haven't quite gotten them to the point of being independent musicians. We made them very reliant on us and very reliant on the composer. And those are good things to be reliant on, but if that's where it stops, we haven't helped them to become individual musicians or artists in that way of being able to use music to say something of their own, if you want to say it that way. So yeah, that's right on. If you think of an artisan, you could think of somebody who works with a precious metal and makes jewelry, and they're making they're following a pattern, they're doing it over and over, and they're doing it very skilled. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, that's a great a way to be. It's a great profession. You can make a living as a skilled artisan. But if we want to help our kids take the level to artists, it just can't stop there. Is what it's talking about. So, artists, there's more the originality aspect of it and the personal production part of it. So, also, what musical skills best allow students to make music on their own then? How can we help them take that next step? Well, one is experimenting with the expression of pieces that she just mentioned. That's one way to have some creative aspects to the process. What are some other ways? Think even levels of learning sequence activities in Gordon's music learning theory that I had you list out last time. What were some of those higher levels on his sequence of learning?
Getting them to like, create something like a small arrangement or something.
Yeah, even simple improvisation. I'm going to do one pattern, you do one that's a little different back. We can start there maybe. And then eventually I'll start a phrase, you end it. And we can do the sequentially more and more difficult improvisations to the point where maybe they can get so that we can give them a tune and they can make up a counter melody. And we can do that. There's an activity for that I'll show you guys later, at least in our class. I don't think we'll have time today, where you can go step by step, kind of 5 different steps to teaching harmonic improvisation in your ensemble. Harmonic improvisation is where everybody learns the harmonic pattern and then can either harmonize by ear or make up a counter melody to a melody that's going on over that chord progression. So this is what you do naturally if you harmonize by ear when you're singing or on your instrument. You're doing harmonic improvisation. So we can actually teach that, and everybody can succeed at some level in that process at the same time, and it all sounds good. This is one of the coolest things I ran across in my classes up at Michigan State that had to do with these ideas, because I had no idea how to. Okay, so I can do it, but how do I teach that? Isn't that something you're born with, and that's what most music teachers think. But no, it's just this sequential step-by-step thing, just like anything else. You just have to know the steps. So if any of you that are vocal people want, I can shoot you on the outlines for how to go about that, the steps or whatever, but we won't be able to quite get to that today. But that was one of the really cool things. And the kids love it too, because once they get past being shy about it, and realize that, oh, okay, this is progressing slowly and I can succeed at every step, and if I'm not ready for the next step, I can stay at the one I'm at, and you give them ownership of where they are in the process. It all sounds good together. And you have a group of 40, you might have 40 different things going on at the same time, but it all still works. So it's very cool. And then there's just more general creativity type things, like you're talking about a composing class, you know, or a composing segment in a class. And so how do you go about trying to write new music on your own? And what's the process? And do you have to write it down for it to be a composition? And, you know, just get them thinking all of those type of ways. And now with the computer and electronics and that every kid has at their disposal, everybody can be a composer at some level and keep a record of it, at least an auditory record, you know, because they can record it into their phone really easily and come back and mess around with it later, maybe change a few things, and eventually, maybe if they can get to the point that they can notate it, even do that. And I actually had a separate composing class I do at our school that a lot of the kids would just take as an elective, where we kind of helped them bridge that process and get to whatever level they were, get something, help them write it down by the end of the semester, and a lot of them would then submit those for our competition at the end of the year as music arrangements or compositions, and had a lot of fun with that. So that's one of my favorite things to do. Anything else from that chapter? It's almost time for the first break here, and the next 2 hours will actually be all activities. So I'm going to make the outline from the next 2 hours available to you, but I don't want you to worry about writing anything down. We're just going to do a bunch of things together, because I want you to see it and feel it and experience it, and then we'll get back to, you know, you can come back later and just kind of glance through and have it for a record, and maybe if you want to do an activity like that when you're teaching this semester or during clinicals, you'll have something to look back on and kind of reference in that way. So, yes ma'am?
So you said that if somebody's having trouble tuning in their mind or audiating and tuning their instrument, you would approach that with getting them to sing.
Yep. And so a lot of times it's as simple as having them all sing the resting tone. That just clues their mind back into the key, and then maybe even sing the scale that goes along with the major or minor that you're in solfege. Sing some of the arpeggio patterns that are part of the harmonies. We'll go through this exact thing later on. But a lot of times, especially with groups that are already pretty good, all you have to do is just have them get so they can play that passage and stop at any point and hum the resting tone. So they're keeping the key in their mind and the tonality in their mind as they sing. And you'll see a lot of instrumental directors do that with tuning now. That's kind of worked its way into more of a norm, where they'll tune by having somebody play the tuning pitch, everybody hum it, now play it on their instrument. And that's kind of an initial step of that same idea. But then they don't tend to come back to it during rehearsal, and when it's needed, that's what you do. You say, okay, I'm hearing intonation, it just sounds like we're not audiating or not thinking in the key or whatever terminology you want to use. Let's go ahead and hum the keynote. Who knows what the keynote is? You know, and you just kind of, whatever terminology you're going to use. I say resting tone because my kids are used to it, but you know, if you're coming into a traditional educational setting, you'd have to figure out what terms, or else explain yours quickly and then go on from there. So, okay, cool. Let's take a break and we'll get back to some activities at the top of the hour.
You have to video yourself playing the piano accompaniment.
For our second hour, let's begin with the idea of teaching a rote song. Now this may sound like an elementary music activity, and it definitely is, but it also has good application at the secondary level for the types of things that we're trying to help our kids develop for their audiation. Because what we want to do is not try to teach them every new thing through notation. We want to put that in the proper order. So by teaching some things by ear, obviously at that level we're going to have notation going on in our literature and probably our warm-up books and this and that. But if you also include a by ear segment of your rehearsal, especially in the warm-up, that helps this whole music thinking and music, this whole audiation side, to develop a lot more quickly. So a lot of times I would purposefully start a rehearsal, whether band or choir, which were the two instrumental groups I had that were my music ed classes. We would start with something where they weren't looking at notation, and that was on purpose. So, gonna just hum a tune here for you today, And during this first time, go ahead and listen for the steady beat, the macro beat, the one you clap or conduct, and go ahead and put it in your heels as I sing. All right? Do 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 do. Now I noticed something that you'll also notice with your students. If you don't tell them what the macro beat is, you'll have different answers, and even different right answers, because they'll latch on to a different beat level is what I call it. We have at least 2, if not 3 different speeds of beats kind of all going on at once that we use as a framework, or we could say a skeleton for putting our rhythm patterns on it, if you will, a scaffolding. And so some of you I saw doing this. Da, 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 da. A couple of you I saw doing this. Da, 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 da. And like I say, it's not a right or wrong answer, but just for purposes of our exercise, let's go ahead and go with the slower one. We'll challenge you a little bit. Feeling a slower macro beat is often associated with either older students, because they're not little and short and their legs don't move as fast, so they feel that slower beat more naturally than the little guys who all they can latch onto is the very fastest level possible. But also it's a mark of higher rhythm audiation to be able to feel slower macro beat and be able to sense music in that way. And as you become even a performer, you start thinking in measures and phrases and sections more than just no, 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 no. That's part of the natural process of becoming a musician. So let's go ahead and do this one this time. I'll sing it one more time. Da 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 da. And it's heels on the floor, and try to make it kind of a flowing up and down motion. I could have you get up and be swaying back and forth and all that type of thing, and I might end a little bit here. But for right now, just go ahead and stay seated. Ready and go. Da 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 da. Do 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 do. Good. Now let's add the other beat level that you guys had, which is the one that goes this speed. Da 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 da. And let's pat it with 2 hands on our laps. Ready and go. Do 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 do. Now some of you have already tried to do the third step, which is put them together. Now you'll see when even high schoolers, when they try this step, they'll do this. You know, they just can't separate the two sometimes, but that tells you also a little bit about their physical coordination, and usually corresponds directly to how well they audiate tempo and things like that. So we want to try them to help them develop the ability to move at 2 different speeds at the same time while they're thinking music. Once they can do that, then that locks them into the whole context of rhythm a lot better. So let's get this speed going, and this is what I'd recommend at first. Just help them do 1 speed at a time. All right. Now the speed on top of it. Da 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 have some overachievers harmonizing to the melody already. Excellent. And if it was a high school choir, it'd probably be doing the same thing. You have your 2 or 3 kids who are already getting into it, you know, wanting to improvise and make up stuff and whatever. At least if it's a safe place in your group to do something like that. So, what have I drawn your attention to so far? These are, if we're going to put words on it, these are macro beats and micro beats would be terms that we could use for the different beat levels. The slow, steady beat that you conduct or clap to, and then 1 beat level up, which is going to be a division of either 2 or 3 of the macro beat. Micro beats are either dividing a macro beat in 2 parts or 3 parts. That's just how our music works. You could say 4 parts, but that's just 2 groups of 2. It's the same idea. All right. Well, that's the next beat level up, which we'll get to a little bit later. All right, so now let's focus on the tonal side. So can anybody remember in their mind the last note that I sang? Can you hum it? Yeah, that's the note that makes the song sound finished, or we call it the resting tone. Other words for it are the tonic or the keynote. So I'm going to use the resting tone. And what I want you to do this time is just keep that in your mind, and anytime I stop, sing that note. So let's practice it. Ooh, do 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 Yeah, there you go. And now, let's see if, now with you can keep that in your mind, and that's pretty easy. But if I was working with a group of students this is new for, I would do it 2 or 3 times and gradually lengthen the time between when I had them sing the note, see if they could keep it in their mind longer and longer. So maybe I'd do the song in 2 phrases and have them sing it at the end of each phrase. Now, we focused on macrobeats and microbeats. We focused on resting tone. And how many times have I sung this song for you now? 4 or 5, right? And if I kept this going, having you focus on a couple other things, like maybe certain rhythm patterns, or figuring out what meter this is in, or what tonality this is in, or if I was singing lyrics, ask you some questions about the lyrics. I could do this 10 times before you even thought, he's just singing the same song over and over and over. But in the meantime, you've been learning the song, and in the meantime, I've been drawing your attention to the musical aspects of the song. And notice I'd probably put lyrics as the last thing I draw your attention to. If there were lyrics, and I'd probably sing it without lyrics while I was asking you the other questions, and then throw them in there if it was something, especially in choir, a song we were going to sing or something. I'd eventually add the lyrics onto it. But you can do this with just a tune that you're going to do in band or orchestra that day, a part of a tune. You could, or the verse from or the chorus from your new piece you're going to sight read in a little bit, or something that you're going to get out that you're working on for a concert and choir. So it doesn't just have to be some random folk tune. You know, you can tie a song by ear right into what you're going to do for the lesson that day. I would say just choose things that are very simple harmonically at first, because we're going to do some activities where we're adding some harmonies in, and if there's 8 different chords that you need to use in your tune, that's probably not the thing to start the by ear training with. Start with something that has 2 or, your 1 and 5 chord, maybe 1, 4, 5, something like that, and then gradually work your way up. All right, so now I do want you to be able to sing this song. So now I'm going to move on from letting you hear it a bunch of times to letting you sing it. So we'll start with just phrase by phrase, call and response. I'll sing a phrase, you sing it back. Do 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 do. We're very shy this morning. Our voices are still asleep. Alright, now I would try it 2 phrases at a time. And then I try the whole thing at a time until we could sing it. How are we on this song? Is this a tune you're familiar with, or should we keep practicing a little bit? Not too much? Okay, let's do it a couple more times. Some of you know it, some of you don't. It's a folk song called Long, Long Ago. 2 phrases at a time. Do 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 do. Notice I've started singing back with you because you guys didn't sound real sure on it the time before. Eventually I'll cut out and won't sing with you, but for now we're still learning it. So that's a way you can imitate me if you're not quite sure part note here or not. Second phrase. See if this second phrase sounds like the first phrase, or if it's a little bit different, or if it's all different. Do 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 do. What do we think? Part the same, all different. part the same, right? If we're going to split up our song into 4 sections, and in music we call those phrases. Do 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 do. Which 2 were the same? 1 and 3, right? So we start each half of the song the same way. We have 2 different endings. And that's another thing that you can do while you're singing it over and over. Try and help them find any spots that repeat. And that gets an idea of the form. And if there are spots that repeat, they learn one thing and they know half the song. So that by pointing that out, it becomes aware to some of them that that is the same thing again. And oh, I already know that part. And they won't naturally, especially lower aptitude people won't catch that unless you point it out until you kind of develop that habit in them. To them, music is just this one long string after another of sounds. So, all right, now I'll sing the whole thing, and I'm going to put chords in with it this time, and then you sing it back while I'm doing chords. Sing the whole thing through as a group without my help. Are we there already? Okay. This time I'm not going to sing along, I'm just going to play the chords. Bum, 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 ready, sing. I've played the harmony part a couple times for you. Let's focus on the harmony. We're going to sing what's called the root melody, which is simply the chord roots. Those of you that have had theory, these would be what we'd label our chords by with our Roman numerals, our 1, 4, 5, that type of thing. All right, so I'm just going to teach that part to the students next as its own little tune, and then have them combine them. And what that does is that by having their attention on the chord roots, that teaches them when and where the chords change, and so they can start getting that kind of in their minds. So this time, instead of singing the tune, I'm just going to sing the harmony part, the root melody. And think about the first and second and third and fourth phrases. See if any parts of the harmony are the same as each other. Ready, listen. Do, 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 do. Phrases that were the same as each other? Which ones? 1 and 3 again. Yep. So that makes sense. The melody was the same, so the harmony is the same. Now, that's not always the case, but in simpler folk songs, it usually is the case. So what was? Let's put some symbols on these now. We're going to call the first note. I'm going to hold up a 1 because that's the first note of my scale, and then when I do up the higher one. I'm going to hold up a 5 because that's the 5th note of my scale in this key. Alright, so you guys do that along with me. Don't sing this time, just hold up the 1s and 5s and see where they are. Ready, go. Do, 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 do. So even 2 and 4 were almost exactly the same, right? We just held off the note longer at the end instead of doing it twice when we went back to the 1. All right, now, if I'd gotten to solfege with my group, we'd be using do's and so's at this point. I'm just treating you as if this is an introduction thing, and we're at the oral level still, so I'm not putting syllables on it quite yet. We'll get there, all right? Now, I would like some, you guys, I'm not gonna sing, but as I hold up a 1, sing this one. As I hold up a 5, sing this one. And I'd like you guys to sing the harmony part. Yum, bum, bum, ready, sing. Do, do, good. Do, Now, what age students do you think could do this type of thing? Any clue? What's that?
Lower aptitude.
Yeah, I mean, that was my question, but that is true. Even the lower aptitude ones, once they get so they can match their physically their voice to notes, you know, that's a skill they have to work up to. Then they can definitely succeed at that. I'm talking about age, grade. Sorry, I said level, or I said some other word, didn't I? I meant grade. Could you do that type of activity with kindergartners?
Yeah.
By the end of the year, yeah. Yeah, you're mostly with kindergartners, your goal is to bring them to be able to match pitch in simple pitch patterns and match rhythm in simple rhythm patterns. You're trying to get them out of imitation into the first momentary retention and coordination of their voices to be able to perform back and forth. But especially if you have a few that already came in being able to sing fine, they could do this part for sure. Definitely by 1st and 2nd grade, if you've had, especially if you have elementary music that's twice a week. Here in Greenville, they only have it once a week, and I think that's for public schools. That's what I've heard. That's kind of normal, which is just way too low. But anyway, if you ever have a chance, remember what we said about developmental music aptitude, kind of phasing out by the time they're at age 9. That means the more the better, the younger you can get them. So at our school, I had kindergarten music 3 times a week, and then I had the others 2 times a week for elementary music. I would have liked it on 3, but that's all my schedule allowed because I was teaching music for all grades and all kinds from all the way through the day already. So if you are involved with those decisions someday, the more the better, the younger they are, and that'll just help them with everything the rest of their life. So once a week, they kind of forget almost everything that you taught them by the time you get back to them the next week. Twice a week, they remember some. 3 times a week, they remember really well. 3 is kind of a minimum threshold for repetitions of any activity for learning the most quick. Have at least 3 times a week in that way. All right, let's move on. So I'm going to sing the melody this time. You guys sing the root melody. I'm going to hold up the chord symbols for your part to help you out there. But see if you can help each other out on the notes. And I know with you guys, it's not a problem. We'll put this together now. All right. So here's your starting pitch. Here's your other one. Let's sing those 2 together. Do do do. Ready, go. Do 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 do. I did it different that time, didn't I? I've been doing it wrong. I'm sorry. It's 5-5-5-1 on the second phrase. Yeah, I played it that way on the piano, and then I taught it to you the other way. Sorry about that. Ready, 1. You sing out nice and loud. I'm going to sing the melody quiet so I don't mess you up. Ready and go. Do 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 do. The last time it is 2 5s and a 1. All right, so now let's split you guys up. Who wants to sing the melody, the part that I just had? I need 3 volunteers. All right, 1, 2, need 1 more, 3, okay? Then you 3 are going to be on the harmony part, and I'm just going to listen. You're going to give me a nice concert here this morning. And we all start on the same note. Ready, go. Good. Yeah, we have it. Good. Now, if you guys are kind of falling apart, what's one thing that I could use as an intermediate step? And notice I haven't done a lot of this to this point on purpose. What's one thing I could do? There are 2 things I could do as intermediate steps that I didn't do that time, because I know I didn't have to with you guys. What do you think?
Maybe say the rhythm only?
Yeah, and learning the song, I kind of skipped over learning rhythm patterns because you guys were picking it up. But if you're missing rhythms, then I could have gone back to saying rhythms. And especially once you get to verbal association, saying them with the syllables it is a helpful thing if it's not just a really, really easy rhythm that they can already pick up. Definitely. See, there's 3. I forgot about that. What's 2 other things for that specific drill that I just had you do where you split into parts? What are 2 intermediate steps I could have done? I could have sung along with the struggling part if it was just one struggling. And usually that's the harmony, by the way. The harmony gets going on the melody because that's what they've heard more at this point. Or I could have sat down at the piano and chorded with the harmony and sung with my voice and done both parts, right? And so those would be typical things with the younger group. I would spend some time working into what I just had you guys do. But eventually, we get to that point. And then we can do a bunch of things with that song. So we're going to come to that, back to that a little later because I want to lead you through, now we've had kind of the whole, we've done a tune. Now I want to lead you to the parts. We're going to focus on things we can do to teach rhythm, things we can do to teach pitch and tonality, and then things we can do to teach harmony. Kind of 3 separate ways of thinking about teaching audiation here that we can throw mostly into our warm-ups, but also into the middle of rehearsal as we get to things and you can tell the kids need help on it. So I'm going to just pass out the rote song teaching sequence that describes what we just did, and you can stash that away for another time. This was something that I picked up in my classes at Michigan State that I used over and over and over again for many different times till I had it memorized. It's a very good way. In fact, I'd even use this sequence when I was teaching our elementary kids their whole Christmas musical. We did a Christmas musical for our school Christmas concert each year, 20 to 30 minute musical. So I have 6 or 8 pieces I teach them. I did this type of process for teaching all the songs, and what do you know? They sing in tune and they had a nice sound, and people were amazed that these little elementary kids could actually sound good, you know, and because they've been approaching it musically the whole time instead of just shouting out lyrics as loud as they could possibly shout them out because some teacher wanted them to be enthusiastic, right? So anyway, let's go ahead and focus on the rhythm aspect. Now some of you this is already familiar because you had me for percussion, and so you guys can be our class leaders. Here's just something I made up when I was doing a music ed course with some of our high school kids to help describe using syllables for rhythms and for pitches. So the top half we'll get to in a little while. That's the one you're more familiar with already, using solfege, tonal solfege. Although I do start applying it to all the different tonalities and talk about chord progressions and things like that, and that might be a little new to you as far as some of the harmonic side of the tonalities. But let's go down to the bottom half of the page. The system that I always used growing up was just regular counting, the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 type of stuff. But even as a kid, I noticed that had limitations pretty quickly. It was really designed back in the early 1900s for kids taking piano lessons out of method books. So they would see their teacher once a week, and they'd have to have something to do in between the week. And to sell a book, it had to all be reading music at that point. And so it was trying to help kids who couldn't audiate be able to succeed at playing piano. And so your syllables make a lot of sense up through the like 2, 4, 3, 4, 4, 4 time signatures, and then they start to get more and more erratic as you move away from just that kind of basic thing they were invented for. So, you know, every teacher has done something to try and patchwork it together and add syllables here, and then a lot of counting systems end up being like half counting systems, half syllable systems after a while. But then when Dr. Gordon was researching teaching rhythm through audiation, one thing he saw is there was a real need for a system that was based on how rhythms sound and feel, not on how they're written on a page in certain time signatures. And there was already the precursor to this with the Kodály syllables, but he wanted to do one thing also different from the Kodály syllables. Though in those, you have certain rhythm patterns that go with certain notated patterns again. So if it's going to be like your main beat that would have a quarter note with it, it's a ta, ta. If it's 8 notes, it's ti, 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 ti. And that's kind of one step toward that. But he wanted something that would work just totally with the feel of how rhythms coordinate with movement, and also something that made sense all the way through. It didn't just stop once you got past quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, and 2, 4, 3, 4, 4, 4 time. And maybe since then, G'day syllables also cover 6, 8, and some other things like that. What he came up with is the first part of this, and I'll show you the whole sequence. I won't have you try to improvise in it all today because it's a lot to take in at once, but we will improvise using a little bit. So let's just read down the steps here and I'll demonstrate them. Syllables represent all sounds in duple, triple, mixed, and uneven meters. So what do I mean by duple meter? That's something where the steady beat divides evenly into 2. Da, 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 that type of sound. Triple, the steady beat divides evenly into 3. Da, 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 da. That's a triple meter. Mixed is when it goes back and forth. Da, 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 da. And especially some folk musics do that more than others in some more modern compositions. And then uneven is what we call asymmetric meters in traditional theory. This is when the macrobeats, the slow steady beat, changes length and the microbeat stays even. So the microbeat, da, 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 da. The macrobeat could be groups of 2 and 3 microbeats. Da, 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 that type of thing. Or it might be da, 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 da. You can have different groups of macrobeats that repeat their pattern, but they're all as long as either 2 or 3 of the microbeats. So a lot of Caribbean and other ethnic music uses this. One that we hear all the time is da, 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 da. And they'll throw that on as a hemiola type pattern with a da, 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 da. And they'll have one going on underneath the other one. Very Caribbean type of rhythmic juxtaposition that's worked its way into a lot of modern music of all kinds, including classical, modern classical. So those would be our uneven meters, something where the microbeat level is even, but the macrobeat level that you move to and conduct to is a longer, shorter type of thing going on. And it might be 2 longs and a short, 2 shorts and a long. There's a lot of different ways we could do that one depending on what piece that we're in. All right, so those are the way he classifies meters. And he tries to use terms that even little kids can understand, but that make sense even when you're at college music theory and you're like, oh yeah, that works that way, that makes sense. Yeah. So if we're using terms like asymmetric with kindergartners, their eyeballs kind of go in funny patterns there, and it's just this long group of nonsense. But if you say uneven, immediately once you do it, they know what you're talking about. All you have to do is demonstrate it, and they know what you're talking about because you're not moving in an even way anymore. You're uneven. So some of these terms are simplified for that reason, but you'll find that they actually describe what's happening maybe better than the ones that we traditionally use in a lot of ways. Like, for instance, compound. How does that have anything to do with a 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2? Simple, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Is one really more simple than the other? What does compound mean anyway? More parts to it? Yeah, I mean, these are terms that we've slapped onto there to describe difference, but they don't necessarily describe the sound of what we're doing. They're just labels that we put on as labels have kind of haphazardly developed over the years. So personally, I like using these terms a lot better when I'm teaching the concepts because they actually make musical sense. So, in the Gordon system, he's going to use DU, which is D-O-O, do type of sound. These are all Latin vowels. So do for all macrobeats. So no matter what kind of meter you're in, if it's a macrobeat, it's called do. That's the one that you've seen me kind of stepping back and forth to, or if I was conducting, that'd be a conducting pattern. And then he's going to use do-day, and it's a EH, but in English it ends up closing to more of an AY sound, just because we don't say F very much. But do-day is usually what it ends up sounding like. And that's the DU-DE for microbeats in the duple and combined meters. So anytime we're splitting the beat into 2 parts, we say do-day, do-day. Splitting the beats into 3 parts in triple and combined meter. Whoops, I skipped one. Let's stay with duple. Divisions is that 3rd beat level I referred to earlier. And for those, he's just going to put a ta after each of the do-days. So do-ta, data, do-ta, data. So doing the 3 beat levels, let's go ahead and put our sheets down for a second and experience these. And let's stand up now. You can best feel these with motion that moves the center of gravity. And for your students too, they'll latch on to meter the best if they have some kind of motion that's moving their center of gravity. So let's just kind of step in place, put your weight from one foot back and forth like that on our macro beats, and then we're just going to pat on our lap gently for the micro beats. So let's all start that way first. Ready and go. Ta, ta. Now let's add the do syllable. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Yeah, some of these advanced students that have already been doing this for 3 weeks, right? All right, yeah, just kind of get that inside of you. Do, 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 do. Now just think it. Now close your eyes. Keep them closed. Now open them. Are you still with me? Hey, pretty close. Now, if we did that in a typical high school choir, we'd have people banging into each other by this time. And that really tells you a lot about what they're feeling inside rhythmically. Because if they can't just wave back and forth to a fairly slow beat, it's not super slow, but it's a little bit slow, then they're just kind of going off of something else, not internal audiation when they're thinking rhythmically. All right, so let's add the second beat level on. We're going to do 4 of our do's, and then we're going to start patting and say do day at that point. Ready and go. Do, 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 do. Do day, do day, do day, do day. Good, just keep that going now. Think the syllables. Good. Now let's add our third level on, which is going to be a ta after each of the do days. Do ta data, do ta data. Ready and say. Do ta data, do ta data, do ta data, do ta data. Good. And we'll use that to do patterns later. Go ahead and have a seat for a second. For right now, I'm just going through the list here and demonstrating what each of these is and how it works. All right, so that's duple meter. What time signatures would we tend to have for duple meters when we write, when we notate music?
2, 4.
2, 4, 4, 4. We'll come back to 3, 4. It could be. Depends. All right, so 2, 4, and 4, 4. What else?
2, 8.
Yeah, 2, 8 could be about
Cut time.
cut time. Yeah, that's another duple meter. But on that one, the note values all switch, right? But if you're coming from audiation, it doesn't really matter that much. You just say, okay, this one's the microbeat now. These are microbeats. Oh, okay, cool. And there you go. And it makes a lot of sense instead of trying to figure fractions of this and fractions of that and make it work somehow. All right. So yeah, basically anything that has a 4 or an 8 on, well, not an 8 on the bottom. If it's even on the top, it has an 8 on the bottom. A 2, 4, 8, that type of thing. I can't even say even because 6. Yeah. So you'd have to watch it with 8s on the bottom. Some of them would be, some wouldn't be. But definitely anything that's kind of equivalent to 2, 4 or 4, 4 time for sure. At whatever speed you're doing. All right, now 3, 4, the reason I say it depends on that is a lot of songs are notated in 3, 4 that really feel more like a triple meter. Feel this one. Da 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 ya da 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 da. That would normally be written in 3, 4, but it really feels like do da dee do da. So if it's a really slow 3, 4, you might be thinking do day, do day, do day, do day, do day, do day. But most songs that we know in 3, 4 are actually more of a triple meter feel. So that's just one of those quirks of rhythms that you can point out to your kids, and if they have a 3, 4 song and say, well, does this feel more natural like this? And you move to a duple meter way of feeling it, or like this. And most of them will go with a triple, even if it's a really slow macro beat. 1, 2, 3. Like, let's do Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound. Just feels more like a slow triple meter than it does do day, do day, do day, do day, do day. You know what I'm saying? So musically we understand that, but we've seen it with 3, 4, so it must be duple meter or simple meter or whatever terms that we've used, you know. So just an interesting side note for conductors there. Which means that when you're conducting a piece in 3, 4, maybe you start by conducting the micro beats, but eventually you're going to be wanting to do more of a 1 and a 3, or a phrasing that even has slow downbeats on 1 each time. That'll be a lot more musical way to conduct the piece. A lot of times I've found that in a slower triple meter like that, if I conduct the first and third, it makes musical sense instead of all 3, instead of da 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 that type of thing, especially on a slow triple meter. That works a lot. So just a little free tidbit for yourself. Even congregational leading, song leading, and stuff like that. Usually I'll get everybody, the pianist and the orchestra, going with the 1 beat every measure, but then I'll conduct it more in the 1, 3, 1, 3. A slow 6/8 would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and that tends to make a lot more sense visually than the tuck, 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 bouncing ball type of thing. All right. Anyway, let's keep going. So we talked about duple meter. Let's get on to triple. So our syllables for triple meter now, do, da, di. And it's about the 5th line there, du, da, di is how they'd be written out in Latin vowels. Do, da, di, do, da, di. And then if we had divisions, do, ta, da, ta, di, ta, do, ta, da, ta, di, ta. Let's try saying both of those patterns first before we move to them. Ready, go. Do, da, di, do, da, di. Do ta da ta dee ta, do ta da ta dee ta. Now we're going to have a pretty slow macro beat to be able to get 6 on a beat in there, especially with young kids whose mouths don't move really that fast yet. So we're going to talk about like swaying like trees with the little guys, you know. You're at a tree really slowly blowing in the wind. Any of you ever seen a willow tree just kind of move back and forth? And maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But you know, in the meantime, you're kind of showing them what you want to do. All right, so let's stand up. So on this one, we're going to have to just do a gentle transfer of weight back and forth. Ready and go. Do, do. And even make your hands move back and forth, kind of helps them to get the feel of it. Do, do. Now do-da-dees. Do-da-dee, do-da-dee. Do-da-dee, do-da-dee. Do ta da ta dee ta, do ta da ta dee ta, do ta da ta dee ta, do ta da ta dee ta. Now keep that inside, close your eyes, and see if you can keep with that motion. As I talk totally non-rhythmically and try and mess you up. Open them. How close are you? So even college music majors can benefit from this type of thing. Like I said, the slower the macro beat, the harder it is to audiate. And this is a really slow macro beat. 1, 2. This is like dotted quarter equals 40 or something right here. Right? So, all right. So let's go ahead and speed it up a little now that we practiced. Do da dee. Ready, go. Do 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 do. Do da dee do da dee do da dee do da dee. Do ta da ta dee ta, do ta da ta dee ta, do ta da ta dee ta, do ta da ta dee ta. Good, now we're more in our comfort zones. I just did that to you guys to get a rise out of you. Go ahead and have a seat. I wouldn't start little kids trying to move that slow for any reason. We do a lot of do's and do-da-dees for a long time before I threw in the do-ta-dee-tas if I was just introducing you to little kids. Now high schoolers, I probably do all 3 just to challenge the higher aptitude kids the first day and make everybody laugh at each other a little bit and have fun. But now, that's duple meter and triple meter. Now he actually switches the microbeat syllables to make so there's an obvious difference when we get to the uneven meters. And again, we combine where it's just going, the beats are staying the same length. Do-day, do-da-dee, do-day, do-da-dee. We're still going to use the same syllables because the do is the steady beat and the microbeats are speeding up and slowing down. But when we get to uneven meters, it all changes. The microbeats stay the same, and the macrobeats are slower and faster, or longer and shorter is probably a better way to think of that. So he's going to change the syllables to instead of da and di, it's going to be ba and b. Instead of day, it's going to be be. It's just going to start it with a b sound instead of a d sound. So this sounds kind of funky. Basically, you will start with the microbeats here, and you'll start with whatever grouping that you want. I'm going to do what's called an uneven, let's see, I forget the term he has. I'm going to do a 2-part pattern. So it's going to have one longer one shorter one. This would be like a 5/8 time. Ba, 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 ba. That type of feel to it. So for that we would say, do, be, do, ba, be, do, be, do, ba, be. You just can't say those without smiling. Ready, go. Do, be, do, ba, be, do, be, do, ba, be. Now the macrobeats are harder to move to because they keep changing. Do, 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 do. And on the long one you'll see people cut it short all the time. All right, up we go.
What? I have a question.
Yeah, that's all right.
Why can they not just use do they do that even normal?
Because now everything in this system is about how the rhythms feel and how they're used as a function. And they have a totally different feel than when you're doing them all even in the other kinds of meters. So just do it a little bit. If you don't understand, I'll talk more about it, but I think you'll see what I mean. So in other words, let me just demonstrate. That'd probably be the easiest thing. If I went do-day-do-da-dee, do-day-do-da-dee, that's a combined meter, right? Now if I went do-day-do-da-dee, do-day-do-da-dee, that's a different sound, that's a different feel. So I don't want to use the same syllables for that. And that's what happens a lot of times in the counting system. You end up using the same syllables for different sounds, or even in Kadai sometimes you have to do that type of thing. And he was trying really hard to get away from that. He wanted each new sound and feel of rhythm to have its own unique set of syllables. All right, so let's go ahead and just start with the do-be-do-bobbies. Ready, go. Do-be-do-bobby, do-be-do-bobby. Good, now let's try just the do's, but keep thinking the do-be-do-bobbies. In fact, let's just say them. It'll make it easier. Ready, go. Do-be-do-bobby, 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 do-be-boom now. Do-be-do-bobby, do-be-do. Now just smacker beats. Do, 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 do. So you can see the macrobeats are harder than just the microbeats because they're not the even ones. So we actually teach microbeats first in uneven meters. And I've had, when we had a piece in our high school band that was bum ba bum ba ba dum bum ba bum ba ba dum bum ba bum ba ba dum bum ba bum ba ba dum. Nice kind of Latino folk song type of sound to it. Rondo Festivo is what they called it. So it was a rondo, and it's kind of a festive sounding piece, so that made sense. So I actually had my kids, before we even got the piece out, and they're trying to make sense of all the, well, in my score study, I saw that they wrote it, they notated it wrong. They wrote it in 5/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Dun 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 dun, which technically works, but it makes a syncopation pattern out of macrobeats. Is what it does. Because really, the feel of the music is dun 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 bum ba bum ba ba dun. If people were moving and dancing to it, that's the beats they'd be moving on. It wouldn't be da 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 da. It'd be da 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 da. So that's why I wanted to conduct. So they have a piece that should have been written in 10/8, but it was written in 5/4, and then it was notated in instead of dotted quarter, 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 or dotted quarter, eighth, quarter, da 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 da. It was notated with ties and all sorts of strange things that fit 5/4 but didn't fit the meter and didn't fit. It should have been in 10/8, and so I had to teach him to feel the music before I ever wanted him to see it and learn it some obscure way. So we learned this would be a fast piece. So do bobby, do bobby, do ba do ba do bobby, do bobby, do ba do ba. It's 2 longs, 2 shorts is the pattern. If you count that up, that's 10 eighth notes. That'd be a 10/8 time. All right. So and the macrobeats would be dotted quarter, quarter, quarter. That's how the music feels anyway. All right. So let's just, for grins and giggles, give that one a try. So ready, go. Do 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 do. Ready, go. Do bobby, do bobby, do ba do ba do bobby, do bobby, do ba do ba do bobby, do bobby, do ba do ba do bobby. Keep going as I sing. Bum 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 bum. Now you're trying. I'm giving you 3 things at once. If you can just move to the one level and not worry about the other stuff, that's fine. But in my high school kids did the same thing. At least half of them couldn't do it, and so we started slow, and I gradually worked it up. And by the time they ever heard it. By the time they ever saw it, they knew what it felt like and they knew what it sounded like. And we raced through it instead of struggling with the rhythms for 3 weeks. So that would be an example of how something like this can really help us. Anytime we get to something that's an asymmetrical meter, it's great to introduce it with movement so that they're actually feeling the feel of the meter before they ever try reading it in notation, which looks really strange compared to what they're used to seeing a lot of times. All right, have a seat. So that would be a couple examples of an uneven meter. Those were both kind of in sets of twos. We had 2 longs, 2 shorts. We had 1 long, 1 short. You can also do uneven meters in kind of long, short, long. It's an unmatched set. There's kind of matched sets and unmatched sets, but that's just terminology. All right, let's see. Now, in this syllable, he also holds the starting syllables for the duration of a sound if the rhythm is elongated. So let's say we had something that'd be equivalent to a half note in 4/4 time, and the quarter note's the macro beat. So he's just going to say the starting syllable and then hold it through. Which other systems also use that? That's more of a familiar thing. So if I was going to go half note in 4/4, it'd look like this: do 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 do. I'm sorry, I'm doing that. I'm moving around. I'm moving with the rhythm. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Do, 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 do. So he just starts it, and then you teach the kids to audiate the second beat in their mind, but not to say it out loud. All right? And then for the rest, you teach them to audiate the syllable they would say if that were a no, and just not make any sound. So a good way to teach the rest is to have them say all the notes and all the rest. Let's say we had quarter, 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 rest, quarter. We would say do, 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 do. Then we'd whisper the rest. Do, do, do. Then we just think the rest. Do, do, do. And now that may seem like a really easy thing to do, but get into some of those complicated patterns where there's rest thrown in the middle of everything, and 16th rest and 8th rest, and it can be very helpful to do that kind of 3-step process in that situation. That's some of us have seen in percussion class lately, right? Let's see. Yeah, so when you take percussion methods with me, we'll actually do a lot of this, and one of my tenets of percussion is, as a percussionist, you have to be a master of rhythm. So we work on rhythm stuff and even improvising and all these eventually too. Let's see. Okay, so during rest, the corresponding syllable is audiated in silence. And then these last 2 are just me, just because I'm a rhythm geek, percussionist, and I wanted to add a little bit more that made sense to some things I was doing with my kids. So, although not specified by the Gordon system. And he says the reason he didn't go any further than that is if you can do all that, you're audiating fine, come up with 30-second notes and this rhythm and that rhythm, you have a basis to go from that you can work. You don't have to have a syllable for every possible thing you could ever notate. But, that's not my personality. So, I threw a couple extra steps on it here. Although not specified by the Gordon syllable, ga syllables between the divisions may be used for faster rhythms. So he has macrobeats, divisions. I made up subdivisions because in percussion we get to it right away. As soon as we're doing double stroke rolls, we're doing 30-second notes, even though it's not written out as 30 seconds. And so I just wanted them to be able to kind of feel and say something at that speed and then try and emulate it, and even single strokes at that speed fairly quickly. So that would sound like this. And I would do these with my little kids, years before we ever got to anything like that. And rhythm is just funny and a bunch of giggles and stuff. But eventually they could do it and they could audiate at that speed, which is really cool. So it'd be duple meter. We'll release this until I get done demonstrating here. Duple meter. Do, 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 do. Do day, do day, do day, do day, do to data, do to data, do to data, do to data. And then if we want to go 1 speed faster, now we start really slow, but what that does is it ends up getting their tongues going like they'll need for double tonguing if they do brass or woodwind instrument that uses double tonguing. So do-ga, tugga, da-ga, tugga, do-ga, tugga, da-ga, tugga. And I just take it 1 syllable sign. Do-ga, tugga, da-ga, tugga. And we'd speed it up and eventually they'd just go into giggles. And then the last one here, triple divisions. And by the way, I came across these because I was listening to Bach's Goldberg Variations, and he uses all of these types of rhythms and notes. So this isn't just some weird thing. This is coming from classical music, Bach himself. Not the syllables, but the kinds of rhythms that you're feeling here. So for triple divisions, now triple divisions is a thing. So you can have do, day, but then instead of do to data, you're going to have 3 on each of those. For those, do to data instead of do to data. And so I used a ta or da and da ka for the other. I kind of wrote a do to ka data ka. I used a schwa syllable because I couldn't come up with anything he hadn't used already. But it's kind of a type of sound. do-da-ka, da-da-ka. So let's say you're in 2/4 time, you have quarter notes, then you have 8 notes, then you have 8 note triplets. That's what this would be. Do, 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 da, do. I'm sorry, 8 note, not triplets, 16th note triplets. Do, day, do, day, do-da-ka, da-da-ka, do-da-ka, da-da-ka. Interestingly enough, swing is this. It's duple meter with triple divisions. You'll hear them going 1, 2. That's your macrobeats. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's your microbeats, and then everything's da 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 da. That's your triple divisions. All right. So they don't notate it out that way. Usually they just say swing style and then write either 8 notes or down to 16 notes but if you listen to it, it all fits right into a triple divisions type of feel. So you can also do this in triple meter. Do da dee, do ga tiga da ga tiga dee tiga, do da ga da ga dee tiga. And those are a lot of music uses those sounds too. So that's for free. Take your break. Like I said, I am a rhythm geek. I can't help it. So let's build off of what we were just doing. Everybody back up. I know, you're so excited. One of the really cool things that you can do, though, that I want to demonstrate for those of you who haven't seen this before, with the Gordon syllables, is it's really easy to teach improvisation using these syllables. And like I say, we can do it from kindergarten on up, and get pretty complex by the time they're a little older. So go ahead and stand on up. And I'm going to have you moving while you're doing this, just to get you to see how the whole flow of everything kind of goes. But you wouldn't have to be. You could just be kind of get the beat going and say things back and forth. Or in band or orchestra, say things back and forth and then play things back and forth. That would be the next step to transfer to there. All right, so here we go. Let's do duple meter. Keep it easy for you. We're going to get our 3 beat levels going. Then I'm going to say some patterns. You're going to echo them, and then I'm going to give you guys a chance to say patterns, and the rest of us will echo you. Ready and go. Do, 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 do. Do day, do day, do day, do day. Do to data, do to data, do to data, do to data. Good. Just put that inside now. Do to data, do day, do ta ta do.
Do to data, do day, do ta ta do.
Do day, do day, do to data do.
Do day, do day, do to data do.
Don't sound so incredibly enthusiastic. Do day, day, do to data do day.
Do day, day, do to data do day.
Do day, do, do.
Do day, do, do.
Do day, 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 do.
Do day, 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 do.
Do ta ta do day, do ta ta do.
Do ta ta do day, do ta ta do.
Do to do, to do to day to do.
Do to do, to do to day to do.
Do ta 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 to do.
Do ta 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 do.
To day to do day, do to day to do day.
To day to do day, do to day to do day.
Do day, do to day ta do.
Do day, do to day ta do.
Good. All right, take a little break. Now, this time, I'll say one, you echo it, and then we'll go right down the row and see if we can keep in meter. Now, I did every kind of conceivable level and bunch of difficulties that I possibly could. For you guys, stick to do's and do days, or if you want to throw a do to data in, that's fine. But if you're comfortable with them, do whatever you want. But otherwise, just kind of focus on doing something with do's and do days, and maybe a do to data in there at this point if you haven't done this before. Like I said, a couple of you have done it a lot before already, so you're a little bit ahead on the getting comfortable with the syllables side of things. So we will start down at this end and go this way to give our experienced guys a chance first, and then like I tell my kids, if you can't think of anything else, just do 4 do's or 4 sets of do days. All right, there's not a wrong answer here. All right, we're just coming up with whatever goes into our brain. Ready and movements first. Ready, listen. Do day, do to data, do ta ta do.
Do day, do to data, do ta ta do. Do to data, do day, ta ta do.
Do to data, do day, ta ta do.
Do day, do ta 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 do ta
Do day, do ta data, do ta ta do. Freeze. So if anytime that happens, which that happens all the time with kids, then I just say it back the way it should be, and we keep the flow going, and they say, oh, it should have been that, and it's no problem. And the next kid, do it later, will mess up, and I'll do it, it's just a very normal part of getting used to saying the syllables. This would be a lot easier for you guys if I just said ba or something, but I want you to think in the syllables here a little bit. All right, and with our kids, we would improvise without syllables before we improvise with syllables, because that's a level up from the oral. It would just be like a ba or a ta that you're going back and forth with. All right, so let's pick it up here. Ready and go. Do ta data, do day, do day, do ta data.
Do day, do day, do ta data do.
Do day, do day, do ta data do. Do ta ta do ta data do do day.
Do data do data do do.
Do data do data do day do. Yeah, good. All right, give yourself a hand. Nice job, nice job. Thank you for putting yourself out there in front of a video camera even. You may be sitting, oh, you forgot we were being videoed today, didn't you? All right. No, so see, anybody that watches this could be totally impressed at you guys' prowess here. After 10 minutes of having ever heard these things exist, you're already improvising in them. Wow, right? So let's look back at our, actually I'm going to pass you out another sheet here. And again, those of you that have had percussion with me have already seen this before, but I just want us to all have a copy that we can look at for a couple minutes while I'm talking about it. So here is, in a chart, all the different meters I talked about, and then what's called rhythm functions. Rhythm functions.
I don't know, they started laughing.
Oh, okay.
No, because she saw it and how organized
She
it
was
was.
so excited about the organization.
Organized.
This is how my brain thinks too. We're kindred spirits in that way. All right, so what I did here is across the top you have your 5 meters we talked about. Duple, triple, combined, uneven, and then there's one more called intact. Let me just say real quick, because you almost never run across this, it's just 20th century and a couple ethnic things. Intact is where all of a sudden they treat one of the microbeats like it's a macrobeat. And then if it's a dance, they'd move that way too. So it would be something like, do ba be do bay, do ba be do bay. But the last bay is felt more like a do. Do ba be do ba be do ba be do. So if they're moving do ba be do ba be do. It'd be that type of thing. Yeah, good. You can't feel like an idiot. I've already done it for you, right? But if you're watching some kind of folk dance or something, it'd be a very abrupt motion every time. Every single time, not just an accent thrown in there, but that's the feel of the whole piece. So that is a kind of meter intact, and you would just say a do instead of whatever microbeat on that. And what I did here, if you look down at the list of words, first of all, definitions of rhythm functions. What is a macrobeat? What is a microbeat? And we'll go through the rest in a minute. Definitions of the meters. What makes each of those meters unique? And then the way I wrote them out in syllables, I just gave you a key for that. Why are some bold? Why are some italics? Why are some in parentheses? What's all that mean? And this is just a way that if you're having kids write out syllables, you can gradually, instead of write out their counting, which is a very valuable experience, by the way, as part of learning to be successful at rhythms, write some kind of counting or syllables or something under their music. And especially in the things that are new and hard that they're just learning. So, and also for activities, for learning dictation, sometimes it's easy to write out the syllables and then fill in the notes that would correspond, things like that. So this is one way that you could go about that if you're using that. So let's look down through the rhythm functions. We already know what macrobeat is, that's the strong steady beat. Microbeats divide the macrobeat into 2 or 3 parts. Divisions divide the microbeats into 2 or 3 parts. So 3 different beat levels we're thinking of there. And then, of course, I had to throw on a subdivisions level too. But anyway, I didn't put that in here because that's not important. Elongations are just notes that are longer than one of the macrobeats, or microbeats or divisions. So these are like your half notes, dotted halves, whole notes, but it's also your dotted quarters, dotted eighths, things that don't fall on one of the 3 beat levels. They last out longer than one of them. Those would be elongations. So basically, if you're seeing them in notation, it's either the long note values, longer than a macrobeat, or it's ties, or it's dotted notes. You can make elongations with any of those 3 things. Rests just means silence. Syncopation, is something that emphasizes between the macrobeats or microbeats. Do, day, do, ta, do. Those would be syncopations. Ties aren't something that's written as a tie necessarily. This is a specific kind of elongation where you're putting it in the middle of the pattern. It's harder to audiate when you put a elongation in the middle of a pattern. So something like do, ta, day, ta, day, do. I put that long elongation right in the middle of the thing and then had faster notes at the beginning and end. That's actually a harder level. Oh, by the way, these are all in order of how hard they are to audiate. These are the functions. I forgot to mention that. So, and then pickup patterns, just as like pickup notes. It's something that comes before the first downbeat, the first macrobeat. They do, they do, to do, or to day, to do, day, to do. You know, that would be even harder to audiate, which is why pickups are a lot of times tricky for our kids to get when we're showing them in notation too. Okay, so if you look down now, I just put one example of a 2-beat pattern in each of these and how the syllables would work. So let's just try and read through them real quick. Duple meter. Let's do each little measure. Let's call each box a measure, and let's do it 2 times just so we kind of get a flow and then go on to the next one. When you get to ties, I had to make that one 4 beats long because I needed to connect 2 patterns there. Ready, macrobeats, say. Do, microbeats, do, day, divisions, do, to, day, to, do, to, day, elongations, do, I'm sorry, do. So when I put in parentheses, that means think it, but don't say it. Ready, and go. Do. And then when you see the little line there, that means you just keep the first syllable going. Okay, so now we're going to think but not say for a rest. Audiate but don't speak. Ready, go. Do, day, do, day. Then syncopation, do, ta, do, day. Ready, go. Do, ta, do, day. Do, ta, do, day. Notice I made the ta bold. That means emphasize it, because in the syncopation we're emphasizing in between the beats like that. All right, and then tie. Do, day, do, and go. Do, day, do, and then pick up. Day, do, and go. Day, do, day, do. Yeah, so that would be an example of each kind of duple meter. I'm not going to have us go through all 5 meters today. I want to get some other things. But that would be one pattern that would be demonstrating what each of those means and how it would sound. So let's move on for now. Let's go to tonal side of things now. Get out your sheet that had the tonal syllables on it. Most of you are probably familiar with this system, a lot more than you are with the Gordon rhythm syllables, so this hopefully will come a little quicker and easier for us. So what Dr. Gordon found also in his research is that of the different syllable systems that use solfege, the one that helps with audiation the most is the one that's called movable do with chromatic alterations and la bass minor. So what does that all mean? Movable do means that no matter what your starting pitch is in major, that one's going to be do. So sometimes do could be an E flat, sometimes it could be a C, depending on what key you're in. And I think most of us have learned to do it that way. There is also fixed do, which is basically our letter system, C, D, E flat, F. Those are always the same notes. They don't move around. All right, they always stay on the same pitch. The movable do allows you to think of syllables in relation to tonalities, not notes on a keyboard. All right, and we're trying to help them audiate tonality so it makes sense in that context. So every time we're singing in major, do is our resting tone. Chromatic alterations, do, di, re, mi, fa, fi, so. So we're going to have those for the sharps and flats and naturals and things that are not in the diatonic key. And then la bass minor, instead of going for major, do, re, mi, fa, so, then for minor, what would it even be? I'm not used to doing it this way. Do, re, mi, fa, so, which would be like a parallel minor. We teach through audiation first by having the relative minor. Do, re, mi, fa, so, do, ti, la, ti, do, re, mi. And so la is always your resting tone for minor, do is always your resting tone for major. Now at some point I will teach them the parallel thing too, but that's not as mostly for teaching after they kind of know note reading and things like that. It's teaching like which notes would be lowered in the key. It's more of a music theory thing than it is a straight audiation thing. So for just sight reading and everything, we would use the movable do, chromatic alterations, la bass minor system. So in this system, syllables represent all pitches in the diatonic and chromatic scale systems. It uses the syllables, and then I just spell them out and how you pronounce them. You guys are familiar with those, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do system. Half steps occur between mi and fa, ti and do. And depending on what tonality you're in, mi to fa is a different place in the scale, and that's what music theory-wise, that's what we know makes a lot of the difference in the sound of the scale. Ti and do, same thing. Major tonality would be sung from do to do. Natural minor tonality is sung from la to la. Actually, all the minor tonalities are sung from la to la. Raised tones change to the E sound, do, di, re, re. Lower tones change to the F sound, do, ti, te, la, le, so, se. Except for re, which is ra actually, which changes to ra. Mi, let's see, so, se, fa. It's hard to bring a sentence. Say do, so, fa, mi, re, do. So, se, fa. What would it be? Mi, there's nothing in between. Fa, mi, me, re, ra, do. So since you're already on a, that goes to a. But again, that's not what we're demonstrating right now. I'm just kind of, I'm not going to have you do something with that. I'm just demonstrating chromatic solfege. So that's one system of making chromatics for your solfege. If you go through a sight singing curriculum in choir, they'll tend to do that. That's a common thing to do. They'll teach the diatonics and they'll teach the chromatic solfege as well. So you can kind of work through it as a teacher with them for the first time if you're not already fluent in that. Lower tones we got. Okay, so now the different tonalities. Let's just go ahead and sing through these. And I know you probably heard them at least once, not as familiar with some as others. Major. I've told you the tonality, the solfege, the piano placement with the white keys or the accidentals. And then the chord progression is also very important. A lot of times when you learn about what they call modes, they don't cover harmony in that. And really when we talk about tonality, that's a combination of a scale, a mode, and then the chord progressions that are typical for that mode. And that's what makes it a tonality. Expected chord progressions, harmonic patterns like that. So major, ready, go. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re, do. For major, we have major 1, major 4, major 5 or 5/7, and back to major 1. And that's our bass chord progression, primary chords for major, and you're all familiar with that. Now, let's just go down the scale with some maybe you're not as familiar with. So, Lydian, let's go ahead and start on the same pitch, just so it stays within our voice range easier instead of going from F to F, which would get kind of high for some of us. Ready, go. Fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do, ti, la, so, fa. And that's the one that if we're comparing it to major, the fourth would be a half step higher. We'd say a raised fourth. And then for that one, the chord progression would be major 1, major 2, because that has that raised fourth in there, and then 5, 7, 1. So that'd be your primary chords in Lydian. And that one's used a lot in modern music, by the way. If you get used to that, you'll start hearing it all over. Mixolydian also is a very common one. Let's sing so to so. Sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do, ti, la, so. So this is the one that sounds like, compared to major, the seventh is lowered and the rest it sounds like a major scale. Now, in a lot of these other tonalities, instead of having a dominant to tonic relationship, they have subtonic to tonic. So a whole step below tonic, a 7 chord of some kind, then to tonic. So this is one that does that. So major 1, major 4, and then major 7, 1. And that's what makes it sound Mixolydian, which is kind of a cool sound. I like that one a lot, personally. Our Aeolian or natural minor. La, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, so, fa, mi, re, do, ti, la. Now in natural minor, your chord progression isn't the raised note, so it is, again, a subtonic. I'm sorry, minor. Minor 1, minor 4, major 7, minor 1. So that's the difference between Aeolian or natural minor harmonic pattern and the one we're used to hearing, which is harmonic minor, where they do the dominant tonic thing in there. We'll get to that one a little later. Let's go on to Dorian. I'm sorry. Ready, go. Re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi, re. Now this one sounds like a natural minor with a raised 6th note of the scale, that T there. And this one's going to use 1, 4, 7, 1 again, but it's going to be minor 1, major 4, then major 7, major 1. So that's a really, really cool, beautiful sound that's used in a lot of pieces as well. Alright, see if I can get my fingers on the right pitches. Phrygian. This is one that's used in traditional Spanish music a lot of times. Mi, fa, sol. So the half step comes between the first and second note there. Ready, go. Mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, re, mi, do, ti, la, sol, fa, mi. Usually you hear some kind of, that type of little thing that really emphasizes that tonic, then a half step up, full step down, that little motif there. And your chords are going to follow that pattern, minor 1, and then major 2, minor 7, minor 1. Would be a Phrygian sound. And a lot of really exciting up-tempo kind of Spanish Latino music that uses that one. Locrian's kind of weird. It's a theory chord, a theory tonality more than one that's used a lot. That would be if you're singing T to T. But what people have noticed is this one, when they find it naturally in music, it tends not to be a 7-note scale. It tends to be a 6-note scale. So it'd be like Ti, do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do, ti, la, ti. It kind of goes up to fa and then down to T and never goes to so. And that's just one of the characteristics of Locrian, and there's some music that's like that. So let's sing it like that. Let's sing it up to fa and then back to T and then end on, go down to la and then end on T. Ready, go. Ti, do, re, mi, fa, mi, re, do, ti, la, ti. This one, I'd say no chord progression because your tonic chord would be a diminished chord. And we don't usually want to end on that in tonal music, but maybe you would sometime. There's no established tonal chord progression that's normal for Locrian. Then of course we have our harmonic minor and our melodic minor, which we're more familiar with. Ready, harmonic minor, sing la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, si, la, mi, re, do, ti, la. Minor 1, minor 4, 5, 7, minor 1. So now we throw that major minor 5/7 chord into a minor tonality. And then melodic minor, we sing different on the way up and then on the way down, not because it always does that in music, but because it switches back and forth. Ready, go. La, ti, do, re, mi, fa, si. I'm sorry, fi, si, la. La, ti, do, re, mi, fi, si, la. Then switches down. So, fa, mi, re, do, ti, la. So if you read one line and then read the next line the same way, it'll do that. I did that in a kind of confusing manner there, but that was on the way up it does this, on the way down it does this. So just read one line, then skip and read the next line. Ready, go. La, ti, do, re, mi, fi, si, la, so, fa, mi, re, do, ti, la. And this one can use either one. It can use the one, I'm sorry, you can actually even get the major 4 chord in this one if it's a fi. And then, or you can get the, so they just, by combining both of them, just use them when they want, and it makes a lot of interesting mixes. Yes?
Now these exact examples here, those are fixed note, right? Because like we're using,
I just sang them as fixed do, but it doesn't have to be.
okay.
Well, no, fixed do would be, you start do no matter what
Because I know
tonality.
like those minors and like from those, we learned them, or I learned them like movable though. So modifying so that way you know where the different pitch is, like it's.
I think you're using the names backwards. This right here is movable do. Are you talking about singing minor starting on do? Like
Probably,
do,
yeah.
re, mi, fa, sol,
Yeah, so
la,
like-
te, do. That would be teaching minors as parallels. And that is a
Yeah.
fixed, more of a fixed do. No, I'm sorry, it's not fixed do. It's do based minor. I said la based minor here.
Okay.
So they're both movable do, because you can have do on any note of the scale depending on the key signature. But in that system, that's really good for comparing the tonalities. But for teaching audiation in the first place, it's very confusing, especially for young kids, because you keep changing stuff up on them. Here you have one set; they always go in the same order, and the only thing that changes is when you get to your harmonic minor, you have one raised note, melodic minor, two raised notes. So you can teach all the tonalities and using the same exact order and set of syllables. Yes.
Same order, okay, you said you're using the same order of syllables, but
Mhm.
minor starting on la.
Yeah, right. So, but it still goes from la to ti to do to re. Nothing changes. They know 7 syllables. You're still using the same 7 syllables in the same order. You're just starting on a different one each
You're
time.
changing the syllables when they're lowered. And whatever.
The only time we changed anything was when we got to harmonic and melodic minor, which isn't one of the 7 basic modes. Those are variation modes. So on all the others, you don't see any
Yeah.
C's or lays or anything like that. It's just do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, but you start with a different one for each one. And so you can get through different tonalities fairly easy, and kids can pick them up fairly quickly because you're not changing much between them. You're just starting at different place in the scale with each one, so to speak.
So, but for the minors,
Mhm.
not the modes, would it not make sense to start on do just so that, because it's this, you're using the same.
Well, for minor, the base mode is the minor, so we go from la to la, ti, do, re, mi, fa, sol, fa, mi, re, do, ti, la. Then with harmonic minor and melodic minor, it's gonna stay minor, so we're gonna still audiate la as the resting tone. We're just gonna make a change here or there to it. La, ti, do, re, mi, fa, si, fa, mi, re, do, ti, la. We're raising the 7th note, or la, ti, do, re, mi, fi, si, la. We're raising the 6th and 7th note.
So you're basing everything off of nature, and like it's a relative minor.
Relative minor, yeah. We all the tonalities are relative in this system, and that's because for audiation, that's what helps them get it the quickest. Now later on, when you're teaching them like parallel minors and doing music theory, you say another way we could get the same sound is by do, re, mi, and you may even ask them, let's start on do now and try and get a minor sound. What would we have to change? But that's more of a theoretical. Where are the half steps, whole steps, all that. All we're teaching them is one sound set. A set of syllables with half steps between mi and fa and ti and do every time, and we just start on a different one, and they do the same half steps in the same place on every one. They have the same syllables on every one, so it's for audiation purposes. This is what they found helps kids the best and causes the least confusion. So now anything that you do consistently can work. I'm not saying the other doesn't work. I'm just saying that this has advantages for audiation side of things. But I would eventually, especially when they're in high school, and I wanted them to be able to turn a major scale into a minor scale, or if they're ready even in middle school to do something like that, I would bring up that other way of thinking about it and say, all right, so now let's try and start on do, but make a minor scale. What would we have to do? And then that's a music theory discussion. And so they're already auditing, they already can do major and minor good. Now we're just playing around with it as composers or performers would mess with stuff, improvisers would mess with stuff. So, but yeah, that is different than you guys have had here, I realize, in your sight singing classes. But I'm just telling you, you might want to think about this way of doing it for teaching it, just because it's totally the audiation based. And when you're using syllables, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get them to audiate something. And for audiation, this has been shown to be a little more geared toward that purpose than some of the other systems. The others can work too. Anything you do consistently and do over and over, most kids will get after a while. But those tend to make a little bit more confusion on the audiation side of things because you're changing more things sooner in the process than you are here. So, all right, any other questions on that? Yes.
I just have one question, like practically speaking, do you, like, as far as literature goes, how much literature do you find that use the modes?
Well, I would stay away from the term mode because they all have harmonic progressions in them.
Yeah.
So, but the tonalities is the language that I would use a lot. Especially British Isles folk music uses a lot of mixed Lydian and Dorian, and even some Lydian. And then as you get into different cultures around the world, they tend to use one or other of these more. You never see Locrian pretty much in folk music, but you see all of the others. And then in modern compositions, 20th century on, you see these used a lot of times.
Yeah.
And they'll appear as, they'll tend to not write them in the right key signature. They'll tend to write them in the major key signature and throw in accidentals all the time. So they're thinking, like you're saying, only with a letter system, in kind of a fixed dose system in the way they notate. For instance, if you were, you want a minor sound, you could put it in a key. Let's say you wanted to sing in A minor, you could put it in C major key signature, or you could put it in A major key signature and put flats in all over the place. And they tend to do the second one, especially a lot of times there won't be a whole piece that's in one of these, but they'll use sections of the piece that kind of flips back and forth from major and minor into one of these, and then just add the accidentals and go back. So, for instance, if you wanted to do, let's say, a Dorian scale, what key would it have to be in to have no accidentals? It'd be a D to D, right? So, and then if you want to do a G Dorian, then you'd go from G to G, but you'd have a certain key signature in place. But they'll tend not to do that. They'll tend to put the resting tone, whatever the major scale would be, and then just add accidentals in to make it sound. So you as a director have to say, oh, that's more of a Lydian sound, and then teach Lydian and have them sing a Lydian scale and show them how it match up with the notes and stuff like that. It's the same thing that they do in time signatures. They tend not to do time signatures according to audiation a lot of times, especially if you get into the uneven meters. They'll do them as something the kids are familiar with that technically works out the right notes for the right measure, but it doesn't give you the feel of the music visually. They'll do the same thing in tonalities a lot of times. Major and minor, they tend to be consistent with the others. They tend to choose whatever one of those is closest and then just throw accidentals in, which is fine. It gets the same sound, but you just have to realize that as a conductor. Any other question about the tonal systems here that we're going on? Okay, so let's go ahead and move to some things. Just talking about, okay, so how do we work these in the secondary setting? First of all, let's go back to rhythm. Realize, first of all, the readiness is physical coordination. So if you're going to accurately perform rhythms, they need to be able to imagine moving in macrobeats and microbeats, and then add rhythm patterns to that imagined motion. So sometimes you can't get kids up moving in your room or whatever. Maybe you have to do this type of thing in their seats. Or if you can have them experience this once, most of them kind of get the sense of it, then after that have them move in their seats. But some way, get them so that they're moving to 2 beat levels and then putting rhythms on top of that. That is the readiness and the foundation for success and confidence in rhythm. You can't imagine what you haven't experienced. So if you can't imagine the underlying feel of macrobeats and microbeats, you can't perform successfully with it. You're just trying to kind of keep places in the measure along with where the conductor's baton is at the time and copy those people around you. Then the foundation of teaching rhythm, obviously rhythm audiation, being able to imagine and perform rhythm patterns in the context of meter. So I showed you the rhythm coordination sequence where you're getting them moving to different beat levels, and for whatever meter that they're going to be experiencing, especially when they get to a new one, that's a really helpful and valuable thing to do, like I described when we got the Rondo Festivo. Just have them move to rhythms and maybe even say patterns back and forth to that level, at least having them echo me in them, if not make them up for themselves. But then as you went on and did this day after day, you would want to get them to the point where they can improvise in that rhythm, in that meter, to have them be really solid with what they're doing and they're performing as well. When kids get so they can improvise in something you're teaching, then you know they have it. They can't improvise it unless it's inside of them. So that's kind of your tell as a teacher to get inside their brain. If they can successfully improvise with macrobeats, microbeats, and divisions in duple meter, they're audiating macrobeats, microbeats, divisions, and duple meter. And then maybe if you move on to harder patterns, they aren't yet, but at least for the ones you've covered, you know they are. So improvisations not only helps them get it, it's like a step that helps them develop their audiation faster, but it's also a good thing for you to know that your group as a whole or individuals have that inside one. Call and response patterns, we can do, we do a lot of this type of thing in elementary band and orchestra at first, hopefully before we get them reading, we get them so that they can know a few songs by ear and play them on their instruments, know common rhythm patterns, know common tonal patterns, be able to echo them on their instruments, and play songs in various tonalities and meters. I usually would have them play about 6 different songs that covered major duple, major triple, minor triple, and it would take about 2 months, but then they could play in tune, they could play melody and harmony in tune by ear, and they could play and feel in those different meters and tonalities, and then we jumped into their band books, and it's like, okay, so this just is what you're doing here, this is what you're doing here, and they race through it, and they can teach themselves pieces at that point instead of me having to just do it over and over and over and correct all the mistakes. So if you're teaching notation from audiation, then they become their own teachers, and you just stay one step ahead of them with things you're doing in warm-ups so that they have the audiation readiness for what they're about to get in their books. Then you show them the fingerings or positions or whatever it would be, and help them make those connections. All right? So call and response patterns, chanting back and forth with instruments. I would say rhythm pattern, they say it back and forth, they play it. I say rhythm pattern, they say it back, they play it. Then eventually I cut out those intermediate steps to where it's just I say a regular pattern, they say the rhythms, they play it. And then also an easier way is just me play or say some neutral syllable and they do it back and forth. But realize that's kind of the easiest level. Ba, 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 ba. Play it back on a concert C. Da, da, and that's kind of the first level. Then having them try to add the syllables and turn it into ba, 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 do, they do. If they can do that, that's a level up in audiation. And now they're starting to categorize and classify the patterns, and it's an easier way to store a lot of patterns once they do that. So using those type of activities, even in instrumental music, but definitely in choral music, where you're having them echo patterns and echo syllables, and eventually you want to get so you can say a pattern on a neutral syllable, they can say it back with syllables, and then that shows you they're really understanding the whole sequence of things. Let's see, I'm just going to skip through some things here to make sure we get to what we need. And then rhythm improvisation. Kids improvise in rhythm way easier than they improvise in pitch. It's a great place to get them used to improvising, get them used to creating, and even in front of people, because it's speaking, it's using their speaking voice, which they're a lot more comfortable with than their singing voice, demonstrating in public for one thing. And then just the types of things you do rhythmically don't take as much preparation to succeed at as the types of things you do tonally. So usually I start, if the group's not used to improvising, I start with rhythm improvisation first of all, and do some kind of back and forth thing. It's just part of our warm-ups, and then we go into our pieces, and it's just something that they become used to. So teaching pitch, just like we have physical movement and coordination as a readiness for teaching rhythm, the teaching pitch success also requires a readiness. First of all, if you're in instrumental music, it requires a working instrument. That is a deal, all right? Some kids will come in with whatever hand-me-down, leftover, grandpa, whatever, cousin so-and-so, brother, dad, and they just need to be put in good condition to even be able to play in tune. So you as a director need to make sure all the kids in whatever way have a correctly working instrument. That's like a prerequisite to even thinking about playing in tune. And then in vocal music, it's getting them so they can use their vocal mechanism and control it. A lot of times, even if they can hear something in tune and audiate it, if they haven't developed the physical coordination, and you run into this especially with voice changing with guys, they may have had it and they lose it for a while, or they may have never had it and it's even harder to get. So you have to help them make the physical connections with your vocalises and different types of physical warm-ups besides just the audiation-based things. So that's kind of prerequisite, the physical side of it. Body and singing position, if they're not using good breath support, they'll never get good pitch. So teaching them what a good singing position, what a good playing position is, have them in that, have them connect to their instrument, whether vocally or instrumentally. And then the coordination for good sound production, the proper embouchure, stroke, bowing, control of your vocal cords. We talked about that. So when we're talking about pitch, all of that is kind of something that we have to make sure is happening before they can really succeed in the area of pitch. The foundation then is developing tonal audiation. So being able to imagine and perform tonal patterns in the context of a tonality and key. By tonal patterns, I just mean the basic building blocks of tonal music. They could be short little things I'm singing back and forth to you, or they could be things that we're really familiar with. What are some tonal patterns that you guys practice every day as you're warming up and getting ready with your voice or your instrument? Scales would be one, right? What would be another? Arpeggios, excellent. Any others you can think of? Intervals, maybe a do, re, do, mi, do, fa, do, something like that. Just any of those types of ear training drills that you did in your theory classes here, those are all based on common patterns in our music. Thirds was another one. Do, mi, re, fa, mi, so, fa, la, so, ti. And I actually had my kids try to do fourths and fifths and mess around with things like that too in choir and in band. Just things that they're going to find in their music that are common patterns. And a lot of your warm-up books will have those written into them. Again, not as much in vocal music, but in instrumental music, the warm-up method books that you'll get for ensembles will tend to have those patterns in them. And even the beginning books will have them in the back. A lot of times they'll have a section of rhythm patterns and a section of scales and a section of arpeggios and chords and things like that. So all these basic patterns of tonal music they'll have there, and if you just approach them from an audiation aspect sequentially instead of just from a technical aspect, then they're built in and you're ready to go there. All right, so teaching students to sing using the building blocks of tonal music, first on neutral syllables, then adding the solfege, scales, intervals, arpeggios, thirds, fourths, fifths. We talked about all those. Those are some of the basic melodic type of patterns. We'll get to harmonic patterns, although arpeggios is a lead into harmonic. And then instrumental music, we're going to transfer these things that they sing and then immediately on their instrument, show them how to match it up with fingerings, all that type of thing. So that their singing and their playing is in connection with each other and from the time they start their instrument. So teach these audiation building exercises using a call and response like we did today. Then move to labels as the students learn the patterns. So major has do to do sound to it, and the resting tone is do. Minor has a lot of, you start to teach them the labels so you can start to learn them after they know the solfege. Play a concert G minor scale, and you're labeling a particular minor scale, and that goes from G to G, concert G, and their instrument. In choral music, we don't have to worry about concert this and that. We just give them a starting note and go. So a little simpler on that one. Strong tonal audiation also provides the readiness, as we said, for accurate tuning. And you'll want to think of tuning in 4 dimensions. First of all, tune in the tonality. So have the group of notes in your mind with the half steps and whole steps in the right place, the major or the minor. We tune to the sound of the tonality in our audiation. Then we're also tuning in the key. We have to get that tonality in the right pitch level to be in tune also. So we're tuning in the tonality and the key. We also tune in the chord. So we tune to where we are within the root, 3rd, 5th, 7th of the chord. That'll have to shade and adjust a little bit depending on where you are a lot of times. And then we tune to the others in the group around us. So we talk about listening in 4 dimensions for tuning, and 3 of those dimensions are pure audiation based, and the other one's oral perception, just hearing others and staying with them around us. All right, establishing tonal center. We talked about having the tuning note to start the rehearsal, especially for instruments. That's getting the physical instrument into place, but also just maybe the keynote, having them hum the keynote before they start an exercise, and just get in the same key in their mind. With vocal music. And then coming back to it when we hear intonation problems throughout the rehearsal, having to develop the habit of keeping that resting tone in their minds as they're singing the piece or as they're playing the piece. And doing spot checks. As soon as you hear intonation start going, all right, everybody sing the resting tone. Now let's play that again. Keep that in your mind during this section. And just reminding them until that becomes a habit. So that's like the first big step toward a lot of things are correct just by bringing that attention to them like that. All right, let's see, what else should I mention real quick here? So obviously a strong tonal audiation provides readiness for the tonal reading side of things. and getting comfortable with solfege before you're reading in solfege is a step. So students should be able to imagine the sound of the music in their mind before they sing it or play it. That's truly reading music. And when progressing through method books, have them sing exercises with solfege before they play them, both rhythmically and metrically. Let's practice that a little bit. So here is a page 15 out of a beginning band book. And what do you know? It just happens to have the song Long, Long Ago on it. So as a teacher, I knew we were going here, and I coordinated our warm-up, or in this case our previous activity, so that we had the readiness to succeed. So we've already know the song Long, Long Ago, we can sing it. Now, let's go ahead and, since you know the syllables for do's and do days, let's go ahead and use those. Let's pad a steady beat and just say the rhythms to Long, Long Ago. Ready and say. Do, do, day, do, do, day, do, do, day, do. Do, do, day, do. Do, do, day, do. Do, do, day, do, day, do, day, do. Do, do, day, do, day, do. Yeah. And before I did that, I usually ask them questions about the piece. You'll notice your students don't notice a lot of what's written on the page unless you ask them questions about it. So, what's our resting tone? What key are we in? Concert B flat major. B flat's our resting tone in this case on this piece. What's our time signature? It has a C there. What does that mean? You know, and you're just kind of reviewing real quick on things. Anybody see any other markings on the page? P's and F's. Yeah, what do those mean? What about? There's one more I see. Oh, those little breath marks. You know, and so there's kind of an information review thing as you get to each new piece. Then I go right into the audiation once I know they're actually seeing everything. The second step after they can do the rhythms then in instrumental music, I have them go right to fingerings or slide positions or air sticking on mallets on percussion. So now let's say the letter names when they do that. And I do teach them letter names. Some music theory people wait for that, but I find that their letter names are helpful for learning, especially in instrumental music, the keys you're going to push down, what position on the string that you're going for. It's like a physical matchup. It's not an audiation thing, but it's a physical, mental type of thing. It's a decoding, but it's an important part in the process for a lot of kids. And especially your kids who are catching up with the audiation, they will decode for a while, but at least they can do something, you know. So I teach them both from right away, teach their letter names. I call them fingering names for instrumental, or whatever the equivalent would be in strings that you think would be appropriate. Would you call them fingering names, or what would make sense on string instruments?
Yeah, finger names, I guess.
Finger names, yeah, something like that. And then slide position names, air sticking, bar. They're the names of the bars on the mallet percussion, things like that. So that's how I approach the letter names. And then I just say, letter names are great for talking about music and for remembering fingerings. And the solfege is great for learning to audiate the music. So they each have their purpose, and that's kind of how I deal with it. It seemed to work fine in that way. At first I stayed away from the letter names because I wanted to just focus on the audiation, but then we didn't have as much of a common vocabulary we could use. And what you end up getting into is you'll talk about B flat do, and then you'll talk about E flat do, and those are two different notes. Well, you could just say B flat and E flat, and those are two different fingerings. And to me, it just made sense to be able to do both. I'm not telling them why they're named, what they are, and all the theory behind it. I'm just giving them another set of labels. So, you know, some people would say, no, it's going to draw their attention away from the audiation. To me, it was worth it for other reasons. But so let's go. Imagine that you're playing on a instrument that you know, and let's say the letter names, but we'll say them in the rhythm that we already audiated. Ready and go. B flat, C, D, E flat, F, G, F, D, F, E flat, D, C, E flat, D, C, B flat. Now you already notice letter names are a lot harder to say than the solfege rhythm, because you have to get all those syllables in there. But I do want to know them. I also say for vocal music, they're staff names. They're the names of the lines and spaces on the staff. Since they don't have fingerings or their equivalent, we just call them. All right, so if we're going to talk about this line or this space, here's its name. And we just go with that. And I want them to learn both. I say I want you to learn this so we can talk about music easier, and then we just go on from there. All right, and then the next step would be to do any pitch patterns that we have. and I teach them as patterns, not individual notes, because that's how we audiate them. So I'll say, does anybody see a familiar pattern there in measures 1 and 2? What do we start out with? And they'll know what I mean. They'll say a scale, yeah. Do, re, mi, fa, so, and if it has repeated notes, that's still part of the pattern. We don't count repeated notes in tonal patterns. It's just part of the same pattern. And then we have la, so, to, mi. Now we have our first skip. And so, mi is part of a what? And I've taught them that's part of a tonic. Do, mi, so, mi, do. And we've done all this by ear. I haven't shown it to you today, but we've done all this by ear. So I have them basically looking for scale patterns, diatonic patterns, and skip patterns, and then label the function of the skip patterns so that we know we're thinking harmonically already at that reason. So are there any other skip patterns that you see? Pretty much scale patterns in this song, except for we have that same one in measure, that so to me in measure what? Measure 6, yeah. And you'll notice measure 1 and 2 are the same as 5 and 6, so that makes sense. Alright, so now let's keep the rhythm that we had there, but let's sing it with our solfege syllables. And here's our starting pitch. Ready, go. Do, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, so, mi, so, fa, mi, re, do. Good. Now let's do your fingerings. Let's do what we call sing fing. Do your fingerings and air sticking in positions while you sing the solfege. Do, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, so, mi, or on their violin or whatever it is. Now I'll say, all right, everybody take a minute and practice this on your own. Since they can already sing the song, they've already matched up their fingerings, they're ready to actually practice this. And we don't do it 30 times as a band. I give them 45 seconds or a minute to do self-practice, and I go around and help my kids who I know are going to need some help, and we go on from there. So that'd just be a quick little introduction into how to apply some of this type of stuff. Now you wouldn't go through your whole choir piece or your whole band piece in high school this way, but you could do it with certain rhythms or certain melodies, or you could just take pieces out of it that are going to help them with succeeding when you get there. All right?
Should we keep that paper for long ago on it?
Oh yeah, you can keep that. That's fine. And then I also wanted to, for teaching harmony, I didn't get to this today, but you can use the solfege to have them sing different chord progressions in the different tonalities. And I'd always do this for a harmonic warm-up and just teach them different tonalities and chord progressions. So one person for the first one to sing do, 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 another mi, fa, mi, another so, la, so, do, fa, do. And your 4-part harmony, you can do 3-part or 4-part really easy like that, and then get kids into singing chord progressions and apply it to their music. So there you go. Good day.
Last night